Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some unnerving true 4chan threads. And today, oh boy, we have some insane 4chan threads to get into. They're scary, they're weird, they're unbelievable, and best of all, they're unnerving and disturbing. So you'll want to stick around. This video will be super long. You guys seem to love the long videos, so comment down below if you'd like to see more long videos in the future. And also, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel so much, and the channel's goal is 1 million subscribers. So please subscribe, follow me on Spotify, follow my Instagram, all that jazz. And this video will be long enough already. And so without further ado, let's get into some unnerving true 4chan threads. Hello everyone. I want to share some creepy or strange stories that I know. Some stories were told by my relatives, mainly by my grandfather, or my acquaintances. I have also encountered some unexplained incidences in my life. I will also write some stories that have been published in the local newspaper. In some stories, there may be some moments for foreigners. I will try to explain them. I did not change anything in the stories. If there are any distortions, it is because I heard or read these stories a long time ago, and my memory could distort them. I hope you enjoy stories. Also, sorry for the poor English. I didn't write big and complex text for a very long time. Basic information of Republic of Zakha, or Yakutia. Yakutia, located in Far Eastern Russia, the largest subject of the Russian Federation in terms of area. However, population density in it is one of the lowest in Russia, around only 1 million people. The winters are very long and cold. Average temperature in December and January around minus 50 degrees Celsius. Summer is short, hot, and dry. Average temperature in June and July above 35 degrees Celsius. About our religion. Ethnic Russians, around 40% of the population, are Orthodox Christians. Zakha people, or the Yakut, around 50% of the population. Mostly have Yakutian versions of Tengri faith and shamanism. Someone synchronized Tengri with Orthodoxy. There's also smaller Siberian culture like Evans, Evinks, Yukagurs, Dolgans, etc. But I don't know much about their culture. Zakha, or the Yakut, are Turkic nation with some Mongolian and Tungistic influences. The Shaman's Grave. Grandfather story number 1. Be him, around 7 years old, decide to go for a walk in the forest with his friend. Go further than usual. A strange structure is soon found, like this one on Pic Related. And then he shows a picture of some sort of structure in the woods. I guess it's kind of propped up above the ground. It looks like a little fort or some sort. And then he says it's a shaman's grave. At first they get scared, but decide to investigate it. Shaman's things are found near the grave, like a shaman's tambourine or the dingyur. Gradually, the fear recedes, and they start to play with these things. Decide that would be nice to show new cool things to other children in the village. Back on the road to village. On the way back to a village, they saw a rider on horseback, which is heading towards them. That was the headman of the village. Looked at children's things and asked where they got it from. The children told him how they found these things. The headman got angry and worked out some UFC moves on them. Urgently took them to their parents in the village. Brings them to their parents and told them what happened. Parents also got enraged and practiced some UFC moves on them. Decide what to do. There was a female shaman, or the Yudajan, in neighboring village. They went to this village. Come to her and start telling her what happened. Udagan says that she sensed their approach in advance, and a ritual should be prepared if they want the children not to be in serious trouble. The woman prepares for the ritual and asks them to go outside. After a while, Udagan leaves her house and starts talking. I did what I could. You should put things back in place and ask for forgiveness. Then you will understand whether the shaman forgave you or not. Did everything what she said. The next day, grandfather's friend wakes up and found out that he can no longer speak. From that day on, he become dumb, which I think he can't talk anymore. He lived a long life. Doctors and healers tried to heal him, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Strange man. Grandfather story 2. Be him, around 9 years old. played with his friends in the forest near his village. It's getting quite late. The campaign is going home. Grandfather goes to his house alone. On the way, he meets a strange, old, thin, tall man. Grandfather does not recognize this person. A strange person walks up to the child and speaks. "What are you doing here at this late hour? Go home quickly. Your little sister misses you. Your grandmother is going to cook your favorite pancakes. Your parents have finished their work and are preparing to have dinner now." The strange man went further down the road. My grandfather thought it was a family friend who came to visit from a neighboring village. He returned to his home and sees that everything is just as that person said. Started to ask about this person. The family said that no one came to them today. Grandfather told me how he met this man and described his appearance. Parents and grandmother were very scared. This man's descriptions matched to one of my grandfather's grandfather, who died long ago. My grandfather's grandfather was a dark shaman. Moreover, he was a ravenous shaman. In the Sakha region, there are two types of shamans: white shamans and dark shamans. White shamans are serving the gods, i.e., they mostly give blessings and heal people. Dark shaman, or the Oyun, was like a Jedi. That is, he could use the forces of both the upper world and the lower world. But if Oyun could not cope with the inhabitants from the lower world, then they took control over him, and he became Zemeke Oyun, ravenous shaman. Ravenous shamans are obsessed with harming people, primarily their relatives. This event took place around at the end of May 1941. A few weeks later, my grandfather's grandmother died. Soon, my grandfather's parents died of hunger and illness due to the war. My grandfather and his sisters were sent to an orphanage, where they were later taken from there by relatives and raised. Fishing. Grandfather story number 3. Be him, around 25 years old, going to meet with his old friend who lives on Other Olis, region of Yakuta. Meet him, celebrate, and drink some vodka. They decided to go fishing on a local lake tomorrow. On next day, they arrived at this lake. Start fishing. No fish. A few hours later, still no fish. Grandfather got angry. "What a shitty lake. Is there any fish here?" Grandfather's friend got nervous. "I would not dare to say that. You know the rules. You should ask for forgiveness." "No, I believe in Lenin and the Soviet Party, not in superstitions." "It's your choice, but I'd be more careful if I were you." In Sakha religion, respect to the nature is one of the most important things. When you go out into nature, you shouldn't speak loud, drink, have fun, and throw a garbage. Also, you should not insult the place where you are, because the spirit of this place can hear you and gets angry. Evening came, grandfather and his friend laid in sleeping bags on the shore of the lake. Late night. Through a dream, the grandfather feels like someone is slowly dragging him towards the lake. Attempts to wake up his friend who is sleeping next to him but can't move or speak. The lake is getting closer and closer. The water touched his feet. The water has reached the waist. Grandfather gathers all his strength and started to cry. Paralysis goes away immediately. There is no one on the side of the lake. A friend comes up to him and asks what happened. Grandfather tells what happened. "What a fool. I told you. You're lucky. If it wanted to kill you, it would not give you a chance of salvation." Since then, my grandfather stopped doubting the presence of supernatural powers, but he remained a true communist. Old Cowshed. Grandfather story 4. Be me. Summer of 2007. Sit and watch TV. Parents are at work. Grandmother is preparing food. Grandfather is on outside doing outside work. Feels good. A frightened grandfather suddenly bursts into the house. Said not to approach the cowsheds under any circumstances. Called parents. After a while, when he calmed down, he told us what happened. Be him a few minutes ago. Grandfather goes to the cowshed. Cows are gone to graze, so cowshed are empty. Decides to clean the cowshed. Heads toward an old abandoned cowshed where tools and food for the cows are kept. Grandfather goes inside and starts looking for things. Suddenly he hears either a roar or a hiss from the far corner. In the far corner, my grandfather sees the silhouette of a child, a very thin child with glowing eyes, with a strange head shape. Grandfather freezes with fear. When he stood there was a stick for stirring livestock, feet around his hand. Throws a stick towards the face of the child. A silent scream is heard. Grandfather runs to the exit, locks the barn door, barricades the door and windows. After his story, my grandfather called some people. Several people came to the house in the late evening. I was sent to my room on the second floor of the house. After conversations, people go outside. I was forbidden to go outside and told to go to bed. The next day, everything was as usual. Grandfather refused to say what happened, but he just said that everything would be okay from now on. I have a version that it could be. In the mythology of Saka, there is an evil spirit called Calf Demon, which kills livestock, mainly calves, and feeds on their life energy. Usually, it appears as a child in a cow's skin and makes screams like a cow's lowing. Usually, in order to stop it, people call shamans or other people. I read somewhere that to exorcise a spirit, it is necessary that the person who first noticed it to pierce it with a knife, and then the evil spirit will disappear. I think that rural Russia has such interesting stories and unique beliefs, and so I really do like these stories. This one is a little bit different than usual, but hopefully you're enjoying. Anyways, let's get into the story of classmates of my older brother. This is the same OP. He says, be him, around 17 years old, autumn 2005, decided to go alone to shoot ducks. Came to the place, shot some ducks. Late evening, collects his things. Hears some noise in the bushes nearby. Too dark, nothing can be seen. Source of noise is getting closer. The young man began to be nervous. Who is there? Noise stopped. Fear increased. Heard somewhere that when a suspicious activity starts, he must say, if you are a human, then come here and talk. If you are not human, then go away. But he was not a smart person. Also, he was very afraid at that time, so he confused the words and places. If you are a human, then go away. If you are not a human, then come here and talk. Woke up in the morning in a nearby forest. The whole body is sick. Everywhere scratches and abrasions. Does not remember anything what has happened after his speech. Returned to his camp. Killed ducks disappeared. Things from the camp are badly damaged. Went home. People said that he periodically gets panic attacks and nightmares. After school, he went to Yatutsk. Don't know about his destiny after. And now this next story may seem a little bit familiar to some of you. I read it a long time ago, but I didn't feel like I did it justice because it's such a great story. I revisited it and I just think I can revise it and remaster it much better. So this is The OP's Father Owes the White Man. Sunday. My father passed away. He'd be 55 come April. He and I were never close. Although we had no bad blood between us either. We just had nothing in common, and I never cared, perhaps assuming we'd always have time to form a relationship later on. He wasn't unhealthy, so I never put much effort into going out and visiting him. And in fact, I hadn't, past tense is hard to get used to, seen him in 3 years. Possibly I'm feeling guilty for never showing interest in my father. Perhaps I just miss him and want to talk about him. But tonight I want to tell you a story about my father and maybe get some information on a thing he called the white man. Just to let you know, we are not Native American and the white man didn't steal his land. My father was a very typical suburban dad, and frankly, very boring. He had typical dad interests like fishing and hunting and bowling. He wore Crocs and turtlenecks and drove a hatchback with a custom license plate. Despite his very upper middle class white dad exterior, he was a hick. A major hick. You see, my dad grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in the 60s, in a family that was dirt poor and very religious. I never met most of my extended family on his side. aside from his brother, Philly, who becomes pretty important in this story. But from what I heard about them, I gather they were deliverance on ice. They lived in what had once been a cabin in the woods. They raised pigs and chickens and sold lumber for most of their income. His father beat my father and his siblings during drunken bouts, which left my father with some major scars, mostly physically, but a few of them pretty obvious mental ones too. Sorry, writing it as I go to avoid timeouts. I'm also a little tipsy. Roads closed, no work, been drinking with a buddy, so my writing is slower than usual. What's important to note is that my father wasn't bright. He wasn't creative. He wasn't a storyteller. He could remember things and repeat them, and he could focus his energy into things, but he wasn't bright. Brains were not how he got where he was, so it's with this in mind that I ask you to handle his stories. My father used to talk freely of the white man to my sister and I, more her than myself as they were much closer, but was always careful to not mention him in front of my mother and Philly. Philly would make fun of him relentlessly for his boogeyman, and my mother never knew of any of it. I suppose he was afraid of her thinking he was crazy. I grew up hearing about the white man, who seemed to be a combination of all your typical boogeymen. He was capable of changing shape, but not color. In his regular form, he was vaguely humanoid but featureless. However, he could change into actual people or animals. He was old and not stupid, but still more animal than man. He chose people, followed them, and brought bad luck to them. And most importantly, he liked to make deals. The white man wasn't a Grim Reaper sort, but he was a predator who showed up when a person was about to die or was hurt. And it was such that my father first saw him. Now, pardon if this isn't told that well. I admit I have little flair for stories, and I've not heard any of these old tales in a long time, so a few details may be missing. One year, about January, my father and Philly went out into the woods to go hunting. The two were about 10 and 9 respectively, although Philly was apparently the leader. They wandered further from their home than usual, and it quickly got dark, which led them getting disoriented and lost. What had initially begun as a simple afternoon hunt was now potentially life-threatening, for they didn't have the gear to easily survive the night. Things got worse though, when the ground beneath my uncle gave way, revealing that in the dark they had wandered onto a pond which had frozen over and been covered by snow, but couldn't handle the weight of the two boys. My father, being as I said, a bit stupid, took a moment to react to the situation before he began trying to help his brother out. After a short struggle, during which time my father got soaked as well, they managed to get Philly out of the water, although they were both now exhausted and wet and truly had no idea where they were, for there wasn't a pond anywhere near their house. The two eventually managed to get off the pond and into the woods in an effort to find shelter or their home. Eventually, they found a crevice beneath a tree and ducked into it for shelter, although it wasn't big enough for them to both fit at once. Being the drier of the two, my father volunteered to take the first shift out in the cold, while his brother tried to dry off in the crevice. Now here the story splits. The more reasonable one is Philly's version. He dozed off. My father woke him up a while later, told him they should keep moving. They did, kept wandering until they saw lights. Those lights were flashlights. The neighbors were out looking for them. They met up with some neighbors, went home. Their dad beat them. The hillbillies were all happy except my dad because he was crazy. And then there's my father's version. My father told me he sat out there, scanning the horizon and listening carefully for anything moving in the woods. Animals may mean better shelter or danger, and a person or some sort of vehicle meant rescue. Considering my dad was religious, Ned Flanders would be closer to the truth, but not far off either. Sorry for being slow to respond. After about 20 minutes, he began to hear something. Footsteps. According to him, it sounded like a large man and not all that far away, although he couldn't see anything, which surprised him a bit. as it wasn't all that dark, and even back then, most people wandering in the woods tried to wear at least one bright item on them to avoid getting shot. But despite that, the noise got louder and louder until he finally saw it. A figure as white as snow walking through the trees towards him. It was clear to him that it wasn't human, and he described it as being about 9 feet tall and shaped like Gumby. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and 2 eyes, but no features. Everything was rounded. Scared to move, my father sat as still as he could, although it was clear the thing had already seen him. Slowly, it moved towards him and began to speak. When it spoke, it didn't speak with a mouth. Instead, it was just words one heard and one responded the same. What that means is up to you to decide. Next response, I'll be faster, was trying to decide where to cut this shit off. The order of the conversation in the length of I'm not sure, but it told him that it was an old thing that lived in the cold and that it needed them. It came whenever people got too cold or too lost or hurt from animals or accidents, and it took them away if something else hadn't already. It had no interest in the dead, just the dying. Conversing with it was unsettling, but not unpleasant, according to my father. With that, it told him to get up so he could get his brother, and then they were to follow him away. My father, of course, refused and demanded they left. Why, though? The thing asked. You'll just freeze anyway, so it doesn't matter. Still, though, he refused to move, and eventually the thing asked him why he was so stubborn. It sounded a bit surprised, as if most people didn't argue much. I just don't want to die or have him die, was the best my father could come up with. Then we'll need to make a deal. My father told me the thing, which never, not over any of their visits, told him its name. If it had one, talked like a car dealer or game show host. It tried to convince him what he really wanted, what he really needed. Wouldn't it be easier to go with him? Wouldn't that be simpler? But still, my father refused. Eventually, they settled. They would get out, but their lives would be on a loan. It would be owed interest. And one day, it would still come for them. The thing, which he eventually began calling the white man, then began to walk off. Although it didn't say anything to him, my father said he understood that he was being let out now, and that he should follow it. He then woke up Philly, and the two headed off. Of course, you'd think he'd have been more suspicious of following a giant snow monster that had already tried to kidnap him, but my father wasn't bright, or likely a great storyteller either. Before Philly was even awake, though, the monster had disappeared, the giant footsteps vanishing. At first, my father thought for sure he'd been cheated or simply abandoned, before realizing there was a trail of rabbit prints, which he began following instead, somehow understanding that somehow those belonged to the monster. Occasionally, he'd catch a glimpse of an all-white rabbit, and it was then he understood the thing could change shape. After a while, they saw the lights of their neighbors in the distance and headed towards them. Of course, as a kid, the story was a lot scarier, and I'm sure I'm missing a few details. Even then, though, I understood the plot holes and how far-fetched it all was. My mother used to tell stories of how her childhood home had been haunted, all while telling us ghosts didn't exist, so I assumed this was similar, a tall tale. Now, before I keep going, I want to say a couple of things. First off, I don't really believe my father's stories. Although I think he believed them for some reason or another, I just thought you guys would get a kick out of them, and that maybe there's some Youper legend Google didn't pull up that he adapted this from. I also want to say that my uncle, again, thought this was all a load of shit. When he would tell the story, it was just a story of how they got lost, almost died, and eventually got home to an ass whooping. A few things my father added in, he did agree on though. There were rabbit footprints, and possibly some bigger ones, although these looked like indents in the snow to him rather than actual prints. And my father did end up following a rabbit, which could have been white or blue for all he remembers, out at one point. which he thought was stupid even then. My uncle also didn't hear anything of the white man, not until my father saw him again a year after they got lost. My father's excuse for not sharing this story with him was either he'd think I was crazy or think he was going to die. And only the shock of the next incident scared the story out of him. Glad you guys are liking it, and thanks. Even though we weren't close, it's still kind of hard, I guess. At least there's always memories and stories. A year passed, and my father began to think he had maybe gone crazy that night, or that he had fallen asleep and dreamt it, and just woke up without realizing it. That is, until one night. Again winter, again with snow on the ground, he was out tending to the hogs alone with his dog. As a boy, my father had only two close friends, Philly and this dog, a Basset Beagle mix named Shorty. This was a fact he repeated time and again during many stories of his childhood, which always made me wonder how his sisters felt. Were they not close? Guess not, since I never met them. Anyway, they are in the pig barn, which was far enough away from their house that in the summer, implying there is one, the smell of shit and pigs didn't waft indoors. The barn was capable of being opened on both sides, and in the warmer months the back would be left open so that the hogs could enjoy the outdoors, while in the colder months it'd be closed up tight. So of course my father was a little surprised to find the back of the barn open wide. This had happened once or twice before over the years, and usually meant he had to run back home and get his father and Philly so they could hunt down all the pigs, who even in cold weather would head out in an effort to find food or get into something. But tonight, that wasn't an issue, for all the hogs were huddled as far from the door as possible, and very reluctant to go out, even on a clear night. Assuming the pigs had gotten a bit of a sense and didn't want to deal with the weather, he headed through the pen to close up the door, with Shorty following him the whole way. He gets there and Shorty takes one sniff before darting out the door, howling and barking the whole way, obviously chasing after something. Shorty, my father would say, was a bit of a tattletale. If something was misbehaving, he'd try to stop it. When sneaking out or getting up past bedtime, you had to make sure the dog didn't see you do it. This applied to other animals too, and if a pig or chicken didn't do what it was supposed to, the dog would get into it. So with that in mind, my father didn't think perhaps the dog was after something, but that it was instead scolding a hog that had wandered off alone into the pen. As quickly as possible, after all, pigs all look alike, move a good bit, and my father wasn't brilliant, my father counted up the pigs and noticed that one, an adult boar, was missing. So he headed out after Shorty to find the lost pig. In the still and the snow, it was easy to find Shorty. All he had to do was follow the dog's footprints, but that was when he realized something was wrong. Shorty's prints were in the snow, but they weren't following the tracks of the hog. In fact, there were no prints from the hog, which there should have been. No new snow had fallen, and there wasn't enough wind to easily cover them. And furthermore, there were tracks. They just weren't from a pig. Instead, they were large, vague dents in the snow. These my father recognized. He had seen them before in the woods the year before, if only briefly. And here they were again, with Shorty on hot pursuit of the creature. Mustering up his courage, my father followed them as well. After all, he wanted his dog back, and scared or not, he needed to at least look for him and the hog, or his father would kill him. The pen was decent size for a hog pen, but soon he hit the fence, which was made up of 5-foot tall hog panels. Shorty was capable of climbing these. I'm assuming his build was more beagle than basset, because the image of a basset hound climbing a fence is hilarious to me. And he could see that the dog had already gone over the fence and into the woods. Of course, the fence hadn't stopped the white man either. His track simply went right over the fence, as if he hadn't even had to break stride to get over it. So he climbed the fence, soon was in the woods, for the UP is really just woods and cleared woods for pens and buildings, and it wasn't long before he heard the barks of Shorty and the squeals of a frightened pig. Running now, he came to the scene quickly. Standing among the trees was the white man, who had seemingly grown bigger over the last year. In one arm, he held the struggling and screaming hog, which had to have weighed at least 400 pounds. A few feet away from him, carrying on, was Shorty, his hair on end and teeth bared, acting as if he had cornered the beast. There was no communication or confrontation between them. There was just an impression that the white man had waited for him, that he had just stood there ignoring the dog, just so he could get a glimpse of him. There was a brief pause. Then my father realized something terrible. The white man did, in fact, have a mouth. Below the beady black eyes was a slit, a long line, and it opened just a bit to reveal teeth as white as the rest of them, that shined in the moonlight. Just as quickly as he flashed his grin, he was gone. The white man silently took off, running into the woods, gracefully dodging between the trees, with just the soft crunch of snow following him. Shorty took a few steps after him before my father had the mind to call him back, and the two headed home with my father sobbing the whole way. Of course, he got into trouble. He had the sense to not tell his parents what he saw, but still got in trouble for losing a hog. He only ended up telling Philly because he couldn't stop crying. And even then, he couldn't stop. Philly didn't appear to believe him much, but he didn't say anything to argue against it. Philly eventually began to write off everything as my father being schizophrenic, and the white man being the manifestation of it. I know nothing of mental disease, so I don't know how that diagnosis would ever hold up. Anyway, years went by before my father saw the white man again, although he claims to have known he was there during that time. Every winter, without fail, one hog or a group of chickens in a single night would go missing. Only once was there an exception. One year, a local boy went missing in the woods and never turned up. That year, no hog went missing from the farm. It was the livestock, as well as the sharp teeth, that led my father to the conclusion that the white man had to eat, and that he wasn't a vegetarian. The white man, though, never once told him he killed his victims, nor that he ate them. Considering what he took, though, my father thought it was easy enough to figure out. When he was 16, he saw the white man again. The exact age I remember, for it was when my father began driving. It was late at night, and my father was driving home. He had begun to work at the nearest gas station, sometimes not coming home until late. It's worth noting that my father had his own set of skills and talents, such as being a hard worker or an excellent cook. But driving, especially in the winter, was not on the list. Driving scared my father. He was terrified of slipping or crashing and drove very slowly and very cautiously. Never one to yell at us. He'd snap if we talked too loudly in the car or turned up the radio too high, because it began to make him nervous. With that in mind, what I'm about to tell you shouldn't surprise you. He crashed. Granted, he crashed trying to stop and help someone else who had crashed, but he still crashed. Another car had slid into the ditch along the rarely traversed road towards his house, and in the process of trying to stop and help, he too had an accident. One that was much more violent than the one he was trying to help. Somehow or another, he ended up hitting a tree hard enough to seriously damage his car and injure his leg. The other driver of the other car came out to help him, and after realizing he couldn't walk back to town, decided to walk back on his own and get help for the both of them. My father thanked him, and the man went on his way. Now granted, it was hillbilly hell, winter, and the middle of nowhere, but it would, by my father's calculations, take less than an hour for the man to get back to the gas station and find help, and less than an hour for them to get back to him, because then they'd be driving, right? So in 2 hours, he'd be in the heated cab of a tow truck, either on his way to his house or a doctor's office. It was about midnight at that point. and my father had a wristwatch on which he'd check occasionally as he shivered in the dark. 1 a.m. comes around. 2 a.m. comes around. 3, 4. He dozes off and wakes up shivering to the sound of footsteps. Big and heavy, like a man's. For whatever reason, he assumes that the guy couldn't find help or that help couldn't get down the road, and he's come back to help him. Or maybe the guy just up and left and some other traveler has come to see if he's alive. He pulls himself up enough to look out the rearview mirror. And that's when the pit dropped out at the bottom of his stomach. For, you see, there wasn't a man in the snow. Even though he should have been able to see someone if he could hear them, there isn't anyone there. The footsteps are, but there isn't a person. According to him, he felt like he was in a nightmare and began looking frantically behind him, trying to see someone, hoping he was just overreacting. But then he saw a long white form step in front of the brown and black of the trees and realized it was the white man again, slowly stepping towards the car. His movement's slow and graceful, but he seems a little worried. My father's never seen him in the open before, but here he is moving cautiously like a cat when it's worried about being seen at night. Eventually, the thing gets to the car and stops. Again, there's no angry words, no begging. In fact, although my father was scared shitless, he again just clammed up and held still as they began talking. This time, the conversation was short. One sentence, not said inside my father's mind. Don't worry, already paid. With that, the giant keeps on moving, making a point of going across the road and into the woods on the other side as my father watched. Comedically, he always made a point to tell us that the white man stopped before crossing, making a point of checking for traffic before heading across. Once the beast was out of sight, my father began sobbing and kept sobbing until the mailman, even in the UP, you gotta get mail, found him 4 hours later. My father recovered, although he ended up having to spend a small fortune getting the car repaired. The other driver? A bit less lucky. He simply never showed up again. He left to find help, but never made it back to town. An investigation was opened, but leads all sputtered out. Mind you, this last story is probably the last one for a bit that I remember clearly. Some of the others may be a bit fuzzy because it's been about 10 years since I really heard any of them. Somehow, my father knew that the white man was attached to the winter. This surely wasn't a surprise to anyone at all, seeing as he was a white monster in the UP that only showed up when snow fell. The issue, of course, was that it was often winter in the UP. A few more years went by with no really noteworthy incidents. The white man would take something every winter, but it didn't get Shorty or my grandmother or anything. By now, my father was 18 and 19 and getting ready to leave. His family was poor, and even if they hadn't been, my grandfather did not believe in college. With his sons now men, he gave them an option: become farmers, clergymen, lumberjacks, laborers, or get out and don't come back. It was because of Philly that they didn't do that, although I'm sure my father wanted to get away from the winter. Philly decided they'd both join the military and get out of there. Vietnam had recently ended, and he would joke that he thought he'd get somewhere warm that had never seen snow. I guess I could lie and, for comedy's effect, say they both were sent to Alaska or Russia. But the truth is a bit more boring. They were accepted and went through basic training, but neither ever saw combat. Philly was removed from service for a birth defect eventually, and my father stayed in but never did anything until his contract ran up, merely working on bases those few years. He asked to be transferred somewhere warm, and being liked by his higher-ups, found himself in Texas. With it getting late, I'm admittedly going to wrap things up a bit faster than I'd planned. My father had tons of stories about weird things they'd find in the woods before he ever left the UP, and other odd incidences he tied vaguely to the white man. But it was some time before he ever saw him again. After all, if he was tied to winter, it'd be a while before there'd be a reunion in Texas. But towards the end of my father's military contract, a storm hit the area he was stationed in and brought with it snow. Being one of the few on the base who had any knowledge of how to handle the mess, he saw himself outside a lot during the storm. And it didn't take long before he realized the white man could travel. The storm lasted 2 days. On the second day, he woke early to de-ice paths and roads. In a desolate part of the base, he was surprised to see another soldier in the distance, and grew a bit concerned when he realized the man wasn't moving. Quickly, he approached him, only to realize something. Again, there were no footprints leading out to this man, who he now realized was devoid of color. A detailed white shape with 2 dark eyes. If he hadn't been so surprised, he'd have screamed. Instead, he claimed he probably looked as white as the white man, as the color left him. No interest. With that, the figure vanished. My father was found sometime later by a fellow soldier, staring into the distance across an open field. Exhaustion was his supposed excuse. 2 days later, he received a call from his older sister, informing him that his father had died. There wasn't much detail to go into. His father had simply fallen over in the field and died while feeding hogs. And that was that. No mess, no fuss. My father, understandably, didn't care much. If the white man did it, it wasn't much of a punishment. But he eventually came to decide the white man was, if nothing else, a bad omen. Admittedly, it's now 4 a.m. for me. I'm heading to bed, but if the thread's still up tomorrow and there's any interest, I'll wrap it up with at least 2 to 3 stories I have that are of any interest. I hope at least a few of you got somewhat of a kick out of it. Which leads me to asking a question. Anyone have any idea what this thing was? If he wasn't just blowing smoke out his ass / crazy? Any legends of anything like this? Oh fine, one more. Give me a moment. Needless to say, my father grew afraid of snow in the winter. When his contract ended a year or so after that, he returned to the UP for one summer to help his mother deal with the mess that was the home place. I need to pause here to describe my family on my father's side. You need to remember as well that I never met most of them, knowing them only through old family photos and family stories, which don't all involve winter monsters. My father was 28 when he married, and 32 when he became a father. On the other hand, his parents had been together since his mother was 14 and his father 18. His parents were not old when all their children moved away, but they were old in that way only hillbillies and hicks can be. Furthermore, his mother had never done anything by herself, and with her husband dead, had no one to turn to. Only my father was willing to return home and help her. When he got there, the place was a mess. Despite his father dying less than 6 months previously, it looked to him as if a monster had come and torn apart the place. The pig barn's roof was ripped away, trees had been knocked over, buildings had collapsed, and everything looked in disrepair. When he asked what had happened, he was less than happy with the answer. The year he and Philly left, an enormous storm had blown in off the lakes, bringing with it both snow and wind. That night, they'd woken to find the roof of the barn folded up like a sardine tin and the hogs gone or killed. Most notably, one pig's corpse had been left high in a tree, as if some giant had picked him up and put him there. Oddly, none of their neighbors had such damage. The next year, now even poorer, the family had struggled more. Troubles multiplied after the chicken shed collapsed when a whole heap of something fell into it, apparently freeing the birds to nature. Another storm the following year took down trees which destroyed their sawmill and ended their lumber business. The year after, a car had been crushed under an enormous grandfather of a tree. So on, so forth. The only year, supposedly, that had been free of damage had been the winter just prior. His father had been feeding the few replaced hogs and fell over and died on the way home. Obviously, the news shook my father up. He couldn't tell his mother the white man did it, nor did he believe the white man had entirely. But some part of him just couldn't help but feel there was a connection. that a debt had gone unpaid and the collector had been unable to find him. Hastily, he helped his mother move and sell what few items of value remained. Before the winter returned, he made sure to be well back into Texas, where they had a short, warm winter free of snow, during which time he met my mother. Perhaps ironically, a year later they got married in January. Furthermore, her birthday was in December. My father always liked having happier things in the wintertime though, so it didn't bother him in the least. It's good to see white man can be helpful, friend. Make sure he doesn't kill your hogs for payment though. Anyway, I'm going to sleep. If it's still up in the morning, I'll finish it all up. And then someone replies saying, all right, friend. And then the OP comes back 8 hours later saying, although there were more stories prior to this, they were mostly small ones or more detailed accounts of how animals are stolen. My father probably had dozens of these, but I can't remember most of them, and I apologize for that. If I can get in touch with my sister, who was much closer to him than I was, I may ask her a bit. I'm mostly telling the big ones, but when I'm done, I may include a few of the littles that I forgot. Anyway, although my father met my mother in Texas, she wasn't from there. She was from Pennsylvania, and her family still lived there. About when their lease in Texas ran up, the holidays rolled around, and she suggested they head up to where her parents lived for an extended vacation. So a few weeks before Thanksgiving, they headed up there. Apparently, my father was terrified. For if the white man could travel, then he'd surely be there over the winter. And he owed him a great deal of debt. But he couldn't tell his new wife that he couldn't go somewhere with an actual winter because of a demon he made a deal with? Now could he? So he tried to play it off as a fear of meeting his in-laws for the first time. Unfortunately, he hit it off with them. So when he continued to act nervous, he began to raise a few questions with my mother, who one night confronted him and asked if he was all right. This was the closest he ever got to telling her about the white man. He asked her if she believed in demons or monsters, and she told him no. Well, if she didn't, did she think she could? No. If someone told her they believed in demons, she'd think they were crazy. The conversation was thus dropped. Considering he told my sister and I of the white man from an early age, part of me thinks she must have eventually known something about him, but it never came up. Certainly, as time went on, my mother thought of my father as eccentric, if not harmless. Back to the story though. By now, it was cold, although snow hadn't fallen yet. One night, a few days before Thanksgiving, he woke up to ice outside the house. In this ice, he swore he saw a shape, slightly darker than the surroundings, the shape of a vague humanoid creature. By now, he's terrified. He's either gotten so wrapped up in this that he's gone mad, or he's been taunted before the first snow even falls. Which is why when it does fall a few days later, right on Thanksgiving Day, he loses it. My grandparents were wealthy and had a large family, and for every holiday they threw enormous parties. Thanksgiving was arguably the largest of these parties, and everyone had been planning it and working on it for weeks. By the evening prior, people were showing up, and by Thursday afternoon, the house was packed. It was about then that it began to snow. It all started with my uncle, not the hillbilly one, joking they were gonna get snowed in, as just the lightest of powder began to fall. Like in a horror movie, my father inched towards the window and looked out. The skies were gray, snow was wafting down. In a panic, he switched the channel off whatever pregame event everyone was watching to check the weather, which of course began to upset people. Knowing he'd come up from Texas and that he had a bit of an accent that could be of Southern hick, people asked if he'd never seen snow before. No, my mother assured them, he's from Michigan. He's seen it before. He just doesn't like it. By now, he's panicking though, and people are joking about him or just weirded out. His issue wasn't just the white man. It was that he owed the white man. That the white man was angry. And that he was stuck in a house with 40 other people while he dealt with the white man. Eventually, my mother escorted him out to the bedroom where they were staying. They argued briefly and he was told to stay there until he was calm or dinner came around. Like a child being put into timeout, my father, among other things, was very obedient. So the thought of arguing back and leaving didn't really occur to him. Instead, he was now trapped in a smaller area. And unfortunately for him, the room overlooked the large backyard, which was fenced with just a short iron fence and backed up directly to an empty lot and then the woods. As the snow accumulated and it grew darker and darker, he grew more and more anxious. His time was deviated between watching the yard and woods like a hawk and trying to ignore said yard and woods. Finally, at about 7 p.m., he was taken downstairs to eat. But being locked up there had the opposite effect. He was now more nervous and more anxious than ever, and it showed. I could go into detail on the dinner, but really it's not relevant to the story. The long story short, it didn't go well, and eventually he was sent back upstairs well before anyone else was done. By now, it was dark. Part of him expected the white man to pop up as soon as it got dark. But like a girl getting ready for a date, the white man made him wait. Hours ticked by, and he sat waiting in front of the window, with just the sounds of the party downstairs keeping him company. Slowly, he began to calm down a little. Maybe the white man wouldn't show up. Maybe all he could do was appear vaguely when he was this far from home. With a sigh of relief, my father decided to head to the bathroom. When he came back through, he saw just the briefest flash of white against the trees. His heart sank. His fear returned, but still he knew he had to go take a look. Sure enough, lumbering out of the woods and through the field was the white man. He was smaller now than my father had ever seen him, but still larger than a man. It stopped at the fence and looked up towards him. It was clear to my father that the white man knew he was there and wanted something, but was unwilling to come closer. For a long moment, he stared at the creature. It was clear it was willing to wait until he came out, and something he said compelled him to just go and meet it and be over with it. It took him a while, but eventually he got his wits about him and decided to do just that. He would not follow. He would scream if it touched him. Surely, with 40 people in the house, it would drop him and run, or they'd come out and save him. People didn't vanish like that, and no one had ever written about a snow monster actually killing someone in their yard. So with that logic, he got dressed and headed downstairs. By now, many of the partygoers were intoxicated or had headed to bed/left, and apparently his escape to the backyard went unnoticed. You would think, with his logic being that they would save him if something went wrong, that he would have stayed inside, seeing as they were all too wasted to notice him leave, but still, he went on. At this point, 6 inches had fallen and the snow was still falling heavily. It was a bad storm, especially for this time of year, and it seemed to be feeding the creature before him, who had now grown a bit and was closer to his original size. Without words, it once more spoke to him. It told him that he had left and had not been paying his debts. Had they not made a contract? Failure to go against that would result in that contract being null and void, and he'd have to go and gather up my father in Philly and take them away. Perhaps feeling cocky for once in his life, my father pointed out he could simply move to a warmer climate, perhaps Hawaii or Brazil. But the white man countered that. Philly would not move there. His other family members and friends would also not move. And eventually, it can snow anywhere. The contract could not be avoided. And even if that had been a solution, here he was now in the snow. What stopped him from just taking him now? With that, the beast reached out towards my father. Although the white man moved quickly, far quicker than any man could have moved, time did not. It slowed. So that while he was aware that everything around him was happening very quickly, it also lingered on, giving him enough time to tell the white man to wait before he was ever touched. It was, he would assure my sister and I, the selfless idea that he had to keep Philly safe and motivated him to do what he did next. It wasn't him saving his skin, it was him saving his brother's skin. This did not, he told us, free him of sin. It simply made an excuse for it, for what he ended up doing. The white man waited, recoiling from my father. His mouth opened slightly, as if he were almost smiling. He knew what sort of idea my father had. "What if I made you another deal?" my father asked. "It would need to be impressive," was the answer. My father thought about it for a moment, but could come up with nothing. This was not an effort to be difficult, but he simply couldn't think of something that interested the man that he could sacrifice. Understanding this, the white man suggested something for him. "Will you personally give me interest? Will you let me take what you owe?" To this, my father agreed. He would allow that. He would let the white man take something that covered his almost 10 years of debt. He assumed this meant himself, that the white man would just take him and perhaps give the debt to his brother to continue paying off. Instead, though, the monster simply opened its mouth wider. Deal done. Nothing more was said. The beast simply turned around and headed back into the woods. The soft dents in the snow it left behind quickly being filled by a new snow. A little confused and more than a little worried, my father headed back inside as he grew more and more uncomfortable. Some part of him was sure he had made a horrible mistake. That mistake did not come to light until a few weeks later, when my mother grew very ill. Eventually, she was rushed to the hospital, where they found she had miscarried but not passed the entire fetus, resulting in a major infection. She nearly died and was believed to be infertile until she had me a few years later. My father, of course, always blamed himself for it, although he never told her. He simply apologized over and over for it. He was convinced, though, that all of it had been due to his contract with the white man, and that the loss of his unborn child was the payment he owed. The incident, ironically, convinced my mother to stay close to her parents in case some other medical issue happened. She wanted to be near them and the doctor she grew up with. My father reluctantly agreed. "I may as well have moved back home or to Alaska," was his opinion on it. The next year, my one uncle, mother's side, she had two brothers, drove off a bridge during a particularly bad snowstorm. By the time they recovered his car, not until the next spring, the body was no longer in it. The year after, my grandfather lost two German shepherds he kept in an outdoor kennel, the both of them simply vanishing from a locked pen. On the third year, the family suffered no loss, but two locals went missing on a poorly timed camping trip. My father was a religious man, the sort where every time anything went well, he'd thank Jesus or God. On the same note, whenever anything went poorly, if it was during the colder months, it was certainly the white man's fault. Whatever creature this was, he believed it had followed him to Pennsylvania and that it now took its interest here, instead of back in Michigan. The logic there I never entirely understood. Did it do this all over the world? Or at least America? Were all missing people who vanished in the winter months victims of the white man? Or just people near my father? Had it really moved across the country just for him? Once I asked my father some of that. He didn't know the answer to any of it. All he knew was that it followed him like a curse. BRB, need to head out and do some stuff. We'll finish if thread's still up when I get back. I think there's two more major incidences and then I'll just post some little stuff if anyone wants it. I appreciate the compliments, friends. I imagine if my father had given up the first time he met the white man, things would have been a good deal easier for my mother. To be honest, sucks for her, I guess. Anyway, continuing on, the winter before I was born was the next time my father met the white man. Like I believe I've said, my mother came from some money. After she found out she couldn't have children, a fact that didn't bother her, even after my sister and I were born, she joked that her diagnoses had been good news to her. Her parents, who were far more traditional than her, bought her a puppy to help ease the pain and work as a child substitute. The dog, in 1980s dollars, had costed them $800 and was a papered Barozzi, breed pictured, imported from Russia. Despite my mother's disdain for children, though, she absolutely adored the dog, and the dog wished for nothing. It was to the degree that my father feared she loved the dog more than him. When winter rolled around that 4th year, my father grew nervous as usual. Every year, something had been taken, even if it hadn't been from him personally. And every year, he worried that the white man would take his wife or some close friend. Halfway through December came a storm that left them with 2 feet of snow, and it was then that my father was sure the white man would appear. The dog that my mother had was a very regal fellow. He was also white, very fast, and prone to running off after anything that moved. All these are facts you need to understand. Being such a regal, noble dog, he was quiet beyond peeing in the house and never had accidents. In fact, he'd rather make himself sick than do anything of that sort. While this made him very easy to housebreak, it had also made him a challenge during the winter months, for it meant he needed to go out even in the worst of weather. During the middle of the storm, the dog begins to whine. Although my father was usually quite the gentleman and doted on my father, often more than she wanted, he would not walk the dog in the snow under any circumstances. It was cowardice, he believed, but he simply couldn't bring himself to be alone out there in the cold. Of course, he didn't want his wife out there alone either, and had thus fenced in a large yard. So out goes the dog, who cannot be without a leash or a fence. My mother hangs by the door, something that drove my father nuts, as she wouldn't close it either, and waits for him. A few moments pass, and then the dog begins to bark. For those who have been around Berzozis, you should know this is a bit out of the ordinary, for they are usually very quiet, timid animals, and would rather run home when confronted by something they can't hunt than make a fuss. Concerned, my mother followed him outside. What happened next is how my father described what my mother saw, so it's not even a direct retelling from him. The snow had piled high, and although 2 feet was what they had gotten over the course of the storm, they'd gotten more prior to that. Some of this snow had been shoveled against the fence to clear a walkway, and with the added few feet on top of that, it had made a ramp. Along the fence line, something big moved away. Quickly enough that all my mother saw was a streak of white against the snow. It was this that her dog had been barking at from atop this ramp, and when it fled, the dog went after it. Of course, my father claimed the thing she saw was the white man, although my mother simply thought it was a cat or some other animal that had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Regardless, the dog was gone. In runs my mother, screaming that her dog is gone and they have to go after it. It's chased something, and if they don't find it soon, it'll freeze to death. He refuses to go after it. He makes every excuse he can. Honey, he'll be back. Sweetheart, it's not worth risking our lives. Look, Pumpkin, we'll leave the door open so we can come back in. My mother's having none of it though. If he doesn't go with her, she'll go without him and then have a talking to him when she gets back. If she gets back, since it's so dangerous according to him. Guilting always worked on my father, so with a sigh, he got dressed and headed out with her. Her holding the dog's leash and a squeaky toy, and him holding a loaded shotgun, just in case. So off they wander after the dog's rapidly fading footprints. My father's stomach doing cartwheels as he realizes there's another set of tracks. A set of vague indents that only look like footprints to those who know. He realizes he's going into the lion's den after this stupid dog, and nothing less than picking up his wife and running back home is going to prevent it. So, still, he charges on after her, feeling more and more like a scared child, especially after the trail takes them into the woods. My father did not like the north due to the weather and wasn't crazy about the woods despite enjoying hunting. My father especially did not like Pennsylvania's woods. They're not like most woods, he would say. They're empty. They're quiet. As they get deeper and deeper into the woods, the trail begins to pick up. The footprints are less filled in, the gait dropping from a run to a walk. My mother's calling for the dog, squeaking the toy occasionally, and trying to convince my father the dog will just be around the next bend. This continues on for a while. until they're deeper in the woods than they thought possible. It was just like being a little boy again, my father told me. Unfamiliar woods going on seemingly forever. Eventually, he almost convinces her to turn around, but that's when they hear a low whine, like a dog that's been hurt. She spins around and catches, just briefly, a glimpse of snow-white fur in her flashlight. Off my mother takes after the dog, calling and squeaking her toy, with my father frozen in spot behind her, not yet pursuing. That's because he's looking down at the tracks. There's my mother's, his wife's footprints, and there's the prints of a dog. But there's no vague indents. The prints that had, until now, been consistent are gone. He calls back to her. Nothing. He can hear her, but she's not going to listen to him. And that means he has to run after her every step of the way. She's just enough ahead of him that he can see her but not call to her. And the path they're taking is taking them further and further from home. Back then, where they lived, the suburbs had only just hit the area. There was their subdivision and their backyard. Beyond that was another backyard and then a street. And across from that were construction sites and fields, before you eventually hit hundreds of acres of practically untouched woods. If you went far enough, you would get to more fields and old farms. But there was nothing but relative wilderness for miles and no other big neighborhoods. It was a very real possibility you could get lost and not be found right away. It was a very good place to lure some poor, cursed fool away. What happened next would be described how my mother told it to my father. Every so often, she'd catch a glimpse of her dog, just the snow-white outline of him, or the fluff of his tail. Whenever she'd give up hope, there'd be the dog. Eventually, though, one last time, she lost sight of him. It was then that she heard a snapping sound, followed by the yelping of a dog that sounded far too familiar. The sound was carried by the wind, she said, and sounded high and distant, which made it impossible to find where the animal went. Then, there was nothing. The trail ended. There were no more prints. The dog didn't appear no matter how much she called for it. Eventually, my father caught up. He claimed the trail did continue. She simply didn't understand what she was seeing, and hopefully never would. For in front of the dog prints, where they ended, were those indents again. After a few minutes of the two checking around, they found the dog's collar, snapped and hanging on a branch just high enough to seem off to my father. Of course, my mother believed the dog got caught, broke the collar, and simply never was seen again. But my father took it as a sign. The debt had been paid off for another year. Without the adrenaline of the chase, my parents came to realize how tired they were and how far from home as well. By now, my mother's sobbing. It's too late and dark to keep chasing the dog, and even she understands that. And she's unlikely to get it back with how fast and far it can travel, assuming it wasn't spirited away by a demon, of course. My father's crying too, because he knows they're probably lost and probably being watched. The next hour or two they spent wandering back home, getting more lost at times, before spotting familiar landmarks and eventually making it back home. Those few hours, my father said, were some of the scariest of his life. He felt like an animal being stalked. Like one wrong move would mean his contract had come up. For while he'd paid it off for now, he didn't entirely trust the white man's word. He had little doubt that if they too got lost, well, that's just too bad, isn't it? Still though, they made it home. My mother, now emotionally and physically exhausted, begged him to do her one last favor. While she went and undressed and got ready for a long night, could he please go around back and make sure the dog hadn't somehow beat them home? That he wasn't whining along the back gate, asking to be let in? Reluctantly, he agreed. Along the back of the fence, he saw him. A gigantic white form blocking out the natural light of the moon. He was waiting to make another contract. His white teeth sparkling in that almost smile. Without words, they spoke once more. "Would you like to be free of your debt?" "Well, of course," was my father's answer, even as he got a bad feeling about what the white man may propose. The white man spoke of a rare opportunity. The next year, he assured, could be the last year. No more debt. All he had to do was agree to one last deal, where the white man would get to take twice in 1 year. Something, though, about how he spoke frightened my father. And after the last deal they had made, he wasn't sure he wanted to agree. He thought about it for a moment and refused. It was then that he saw the white man frown, as he described it. It was not like how a human would, but rather it was as if the slit mouth inversed on itself, sucking itself in some sort of alien expression of displeasure. "Well, that's unfortunate," the white man remarked, before simply slipping back into the snow. My father headed back in. The dog never showed back up. That spring, her parents bought her another dog, another Borzosi, although this one was black instead of white. This dog I grew up with. He fortunately was not as regal or noble as the dog before him and had no issue pissing inside if the weather got too bad. Now, before I get to this next part, which I guess is the second to last big part, if I'm remembering everything clearly, I'm going to get myself some food as I've not eaten all day. So I'm going to take this chance to make something clear. My father spoke with this thing multiple times, but it never used its voice. It had a voice, he told me, but it wasn't one you heard, and you didn't speak to it with your voice. It all happened without actual audible words, and things were more gestures than actual sentences. You understood one another. Things were translated into rough sentences, but exact wording wasn't there. With that in mind, the white man didn't necessarily say exactly, "Well, that's unfortunate." My father often could translate these sentences better into things that sounded less corny, but I've honestly not cared much to make it sound great, since the white man was telepathic or something of that sort, and probably wasn't speaking the king's English anyway. Like I said, the following year I was born. My parents did not use birth control. Of this, I am unfortunately certain, for my mother was adamant that we shouldn't make the same mistake when it came time to teach us the birds and the bees. Of course, in their defense, they thought they couldn't have children. Eventually, though, a little miracle, me, happened. This was something they didn't discover until fairly late in the pregnancy, when all these symptoms simply couldn't be ignored. Upon finally heading to the doctor, they found not only was my mother pregnant, but she was pregnant with twins. Twins were common in my mother's family, with pretty much every generation having at least one batch of them. My mother herself was a twin. This wasn't a major shocker, and my parents began planning accordingly. Everyone was excited, most of all my father, who loved children and had always wanted a big family. What did not excite him was my mother's due date, the middle of February. Throughout the year, perhaps cruelly, my mother and more so uncle teased him. His sons were going to be born in the middle of winter. Wouldn't his little boogeyman be pleased? These jokes, of course, didn't amuse my father in the least. As the due date approached, my father grew more and more nervous, although nothing thus far had indicated any issues with the pregnancy. Still, he was just certain something would happen. Partway through January, sure enough, it did. Another storm hit, which caused a few power outages in the middle of the night. With the power flickering on and off and the storm raging, my mother went into labor. Her due date was a month away, but she was quite certain this wasn't false labor and demanded, despite the conditions, to be taken to the hospital. My father, despite his fear of the winter, snow, driving in the winter while it snowed, agreed without hesitation. He was prepared for something bad to happen after all, and so he steeled himself and headed out to warm up the car. Unfortunately, if the white man truly existed, He had also steeled himself and was quite ready for a battle. As my father left the house, he noticed two things. The first scared him the most, of course. It was those now very familiar indents in the snow, the almost footprints of the white man. Then there was the weather, which would have been the more reasonable thing to be worried about. The cloud cover was thick enough to cover the moon and prevent any natural lighting. It was bitterly cold. With a strong wind and heavy snowfall, the drive would be unpleasant. The more sensible person would have just called an ambulance, especially if they didn't like driving in the winter, but my father felt that for some reason, it'd be safer driving her there himself. That if he was in control, the white man would be less likely to pull something. And so once the car was warm, he escorted my mother to it and began the drive to the hospital. Remember, of course, that this was over 20 years ago. These were new suburbs outside the city. The hospital was, going to the speed limit, a little over 20 minutes away. In this weather, it'd be longer. Eventually, a hospital was built closer to our home, but I was born in the recent dark ages. The journey started with a few hitches. The car did not want to leave the driveway. The windshield wipers did not want to work in the slush of the snow, and the heat refused to go very high. Before even leaving the neighborhood, the small hatchback that became part of my father's persona over the years slid twice on the poorly maintained roads of our suburbs. But once they got out into the open, main roads were much better salted and scraped. Everything seemed to be turning up in their favor. Traffic was non-existent. The winds died down slightly. Slips were avoidant. My father relaxed as much as someone in a snowstorm with a woman in labor can, and that, he said, was the biggest mistake. Ahead of them, it appeared some snow had blown into the road, forming a short blockade. Confident, my father drove over it and promptly became struck in the surprisingly solid slush. No amount of backing up or revving forward freed them, and with a nervous sigh, my father had to exit the car and try to push them over or dig them out. It was then that he realized he had not hit snow. He had hit the white man's hulking form. He let out a slight screech, and when his wife asked why, he had no word for it. He couldn't, in those few moments, he had explained a lifetime of demonic harassment, and even if he could, he didn't think this was the time or the place. "It's nothing, I was just startled by something," was his answer, before closing the door and staring down the beast, who simply stared back with beady eyes. Again, there was no real confrontation. It was like having a conversation with a car dealer once more, as the white man tried to make his deal. This thing was here to collect interest, but wanted to offer last year's chance once more. Twice and once a year, no more. Again, remember, my father was not a bright man, and it took him a moment to understand what the white man meant. Once the image clicked into his mind, the white man echoed it, as if to confirm. 2 boys for 2 boys. If he offered his own unborn sons, the white man would finally consider his and Philly's debt paid. It was that simple. But my father continued to refuse. He would not offer his sons up as a substitute, and that was final. There was one last push for it before the white man gave up. There was no confrontation, although my father always used to add, "I would have fought him if I had to." Fortunately, though, he didn't have to. The white man simply slid away from under the car and into the white of the snow without anyone ever noticing. You must be asking, of course, what my mother thought happened. My mother simply thought that snow had gotten under the car and that my father got the car free somehow. If there was a giant monster, she never saw it. He got back into the car, drove her to the hospital, and she had 2 healthy boys, of which I was the slightly older. Despite us being 3 to 4 weeks early, we were a bit small but not sickly. I'm sure you thought this would be a more dramatic conclusion, but it didn't. There wasn't one. But if you've been paying attention, you probably noticed something as well. I've mentioned a younger sister, but never a brother. Before anyone asks, my slightly younger twin brother didn't somehow become my sister either. Everything went relatively well, although my brother and I remained in the hospital a few days longer than usual to monitor for any health problems. The next month, things continued to go well, although my father acted more nervous than usual during the winter months. If the white man had shown such interest in us, why had it suddenly disappeared? Why had it taken nothing else? There hadn't even been any missing persons, which seemed to occasionally subside its hunger in the curse. It was the middle of February when things came to a head. Ironically, perhaps, it was on the day my brother and I were expected to be born on initially. My brother and I shared a room, although we had different cribs. My mother was not a champion caregiver, and my father most frequently cared for us, so when I began crying loudly in the middle of the night, it was him who came to see what I wanted, and it was him who discovered the window beside my brother's crib open. No, he wasn't missing. He wasn't gone like the pigs or the dog or my uncle who drove off the road into a lake. They didn't put out missing posters like they did for the poor man who tried to help a 16-year-old version of my father after he drove off the road. Instead, he was simply dead. A cold body in a cold crib in a room with much too cold for babies. The official cause of death was SIDS, although I'm sure it'd have been something else had my parents not closed the window before the paramedics arrived. My father's logic with the white man was often faulty. Why did the white man sometimes leave bodies? My brothers, grandfathers, and oftentimes not. Not to mention, there's the logic holes some of you have pointed out. Why didn't he just go back on his deal? Why didn't he take the two boys and everyone else? Who knows really? My father never had an answer for it either. But it was clear to him that since no one else died, it was that year's interest. Now I want to say one more thing before I move on to the next part here. My mother was not a good mother. At least not until I got somewhat older. She loved me, I'm sure, and she was certainly my favorite parent. We simply had closer interests and better conversations, but she was not a good mother when I was an infant. She hated babies. She wasn't crazy about children, and she would have not had kids if it had been her choice alone. She suffered badly with postpartum depression, which didn't clear up entirely until my sister was about 3. With that in mind, I want to note that she was the last one to care for my brother and I before going to sleep. Of course, that sounds like a straight up blame my mother for that one. I don't, entirely. I think it could have been some accident on my father's part, or some half-hearted kidnapping attempt, or who knows what. I just always thought it was a possibility, and I believe my father knew that as well. My uncle never knew of the window. My grandparents never knew. Only myself, my mother, my sister, and my father ever knew the window was open. And only because my idiot father left it in the story when he told us. Years later, I asked my mother about it. She confirmed it. She confirmed they closed it before help arrived to make things look less irresponsible. She asked me to never tell anyone. Despite the major detail being left out of the official account of things, other people had their suspicions too. It's important that I tell you that because the white man was never my excuse for any of these things like it was my father's. It was just a spooky story he'd tell that I thought other people would enjoy. My grandparents never believed the SIDS story entirely. My father never went to bed without making sure all the windows were locked and we were safe in our beds. Not until my sister and I were well past that age that an open window would kill us. After that, it was the death of my grandmother, father's side, that my father blamed on the white man. My grandmother, never quite capable of taking care of herself, had wandered off into the woods near her trailer. Yep, that's where she ended up, and wasn't found for 3 days. The official story was that her wood-burning stove, in a trailer, had run out of wood and she'd gone in to find more and had gotten lost. To be honest, considering how my father got as he grew older and suffered a few last shocks, she may have simply been senile or incapable of handling a life without her husband of nearly 30 years. The only time I met my grandmother was at her funeral when I was barely a year old. There's a picture of us together taken by my Uncle Philly, with me sitting in the coffin next to her. I came from real class on that side, you know? The year following, it was my grandmother's, other one, the one who was still alive, Scottish Terrier, which wandered out one cold evening and never came back. A missing hunter the next year. An aunt on my father's side, again, never met the year after. The aunt's a bit of a fun story, I guess. She just disappeared. And to this day, they never have found a body or even evidence of foul play. The popular theory, i.e. not my father's, is that she got sick of her husband and kids and drove off and didn't come back. Then my sister was born. Another accident. Even after my birth, my parents were told my mother was practically sterile and that it had been a fluke. No need to worry. Well, one accidental pregnancy is a fluke, and another one is proof your uterus works fine. After she was born, my mother opted to have her tubes tied and end the cycle once and for all. She just really wasn't crazy about kids at all. I'm actually not even sure she told my father that she did that. Not that it matters anyway. My sister was born in the summer, and unlike with my brother and I, the white man made no effort to make a deal for her soul. He never came for her either. Perhaps because by the time it became winter, she was already an amazingly active baby, and he didn't want to deal with her any more than my mother did. The next few years' list of collections I don't remember clearly. I probably got a few of the ones prior out of order, to be honest. One year the black Brazzoli ran off, and another my sister's pet cat. Overall though, the next few years of our childhood were relatively drama and monster free. Although my father swore up and down that it was a scheme, that it was all leading up to one big finale. There is no overly happy ending, just to warn. When my sister was 10 and I was almost 15, my mother began drinking heavily. My mother had always liked to drink, had always shown more interest in partying and spending money than working or spending time with her family. And to be honest, I didn't see this as an entirely negative trait. I thought it was kind of cool having a mom who would give me a shot of vodka and talk to me about things only adults talked about, which is probably why I preferred my mother so much to my father. She and I were good friends and I loved her dearly, but we didn't have a great relationship as family members. Mom was who you went to if you needed permission to go out and party or wanted someone to buy you something. Dad was who you went to if you actually needed something and had the time to listen to a boring story. This drinking escalated over the course of the summer, and by winter, she was a full-blown alcoholic. I know none of this is really relevant to the story, or at least not spooky, but it's important to know because it's about the line between my father's imagination and probable delusion and reality. My parents' relationship was failing, at least on her end. Her mental stability was failing too, but for a lot of different relationships. And no one saw it. I thought maybe they'd divorce or end up in therapy, although they didn't fight much, so I don't know why that was the conclusion I drew. And my father thought trying to get her to go to church more would help, but no one did much. And so it didn't surprise us when one morning she didn't come home. When she didn't show up from her drinking one cold January morning, the police were called and an investigation begun. It didn't take long for them to reach a probable conclusion. Remember how many years ago an uncle had driven off a road and into a river? That road was between our house and my grandparents' house and had once been used frequently. Now it was more of a side road, used less frequently, especially in poor weather. An investigation showed someone had driven off the road once more, but with bad weather rolling in again, they'd be unable to pursue much of an investigation for a bit. Eventually, though, they found my mother's car at the bottom of the river, where her brother's had ended up close to 20 years before. Again, there was no body, just a car. But fish in the current can carry away a lot in just a few months. Case closed. Investigation over. Funeral was an empty casket. Motives? Was it an accident? Intentional? No one knew. Everyone had their own theories. To be honest, I feel it was probably an accident. and she was simply a bad drunk driver. My father, of course, knew what had really happened and told my sister and I once. It was the interest for that year. He'd seen the white man since then. It was enough though, and the contract was almost up, so we would not need to worry so much anymore. After that, my father spoke much less of the white man, mentioning him only when prompted. In general, that was how he behaved most of the time though. He spoke less, talking only when prompted. He had spent close to 20 years taking care of my mother, even when she didn't need it. And he had spent most of his life worrying about some boogeyman. Now his children were almost adults. He was mostly alone, and he was less and less needed. Without someone to take care of, he couldn't take care of himself either, much like how his mother had ended up. Until I left at 18, I drove him places and helped him with things he could no longer do. It wasn't that he was senile, exactly, for he wasn't old. It was just that he couldn't do it. Something left him, and he needed help. Every year, winter still scared him and he still wouldn't go outside, but he was less nervous and almost bitter during those months. His debt was paid, I think he thought. When I left, my sister began caring for him. We weren't close, my sister and I, or my father and I, as I've said, so I didn't check in much and I didn't visit at all. My uncle Philly moved nearer to the area after his own lifetime of bad luck, which brought some pep back to my father, at least so I heard, and gave him a proper babysitter. This, of course, all leads us back to the start. On Sunday, he died. I wish I could say it was something dramatic, like the house was torn up by a Yeti and they never found his body, but it wasn't. My father did not drive well in the snow, and my sister wasn't home to drive him. He went out to the store that night, slid off the road going too fast, and wasn't found until morning, by which time he had died from his injuries and shock. We buried him fast, and I saw my sister for the first time in 4 years. My father looked much older than 54 in his coffin. I remembered how old my grandmother looked from pictures when she was his age, how old she looked in her coffin that I once laid inside. My family doesn't age well, I guess. Is there some plot twist to this at all? No. But there's one more piece of information, and I've been saving it for the dramatic end. Philly's saying things are looking in his windows, that he's hearing someone stomp around his house at night and catching glimpses of movement from outside. But when he goes out there, he can't even find any footprints. And then someone comments saying, "Go to Texas, and for the love of God, never venture out in the snow." How long has Philly been saying things are looking in his windows? Maybe he's been denying it all these years? And then the OP responds to this commenter saying, "Apparently since a few days before my father's death, although I didn't ask for any details, nor did I imply it was the white man. Seeing as Philly never appreciated the stories, when my father was telling them, I didn't want to upset him. After this semester is up, I was considering moving someplace warmer anyway, so I may do it. Not because of a spooky ghost, but because I don't like shoveling my drive or falling on my ass because of ice." And here is one last story. Chronologically, it goes between my birth and my mother's death, although that should be pretty obvious. It wasn't included previously because, well, it didn't happen to me and I never got the details, but I've since talked to my sister. Awkward process, I'll have you know, and here it is. Now, everyone knows parents are not supposed to pick favorites, but generally, they do. I was clearly my mother's favorite, which looking back was kind of mean of her. I got more expensive presents, I got away with more, she talked to me more, she always took my side. My father, on the other hand, didn't seem to pick favorites, but he spent more time with my sister, I believe because my mother obviously liked her the least out of the two of us. Over time, if nothing else, it became clear which of us preferred which parent. I liked our mother more, and my sister adored our father. Every moment they could spend together, they did. And that probably sounds creepy when you're so used to hearing about creepy, fucked up relationships, but it really wasn't. It was a very nice, normal storybook relationship. My sister had few friends growing up. If there was one thing we both got from our mother, it's a stick up the ass gene because I wasn't popular either. And it was for the same reason. We were pretentious, smart-ass shits. We thought we were better than every other kid. This is where my sister was lucky, for my father most certainly wasn't a kid, but he wasn't quite an adult either. He could enjoy the same shows, books, and topics she did, while having the capabilities of behaving like an adult and not asking or doing stupid shit that pissed her off with the other kids. The two, in short, were best friends. This had obvious benefits for her because she never could get in trouble with him and had a parent she could tell anything to. It also had one benefit for him. He had someone he could finally talk to. Although he had told Philly all the stories over the years, Philly had never taken any of it seriously and made fun of him for it whenever he could get the chance. And while he had told me the stories too, which gained him less ridicule, I eventually grew up and stopped believing his stories and just found them silly. My sister never felt that way. She ate his stories up. She spent long nights talking to him about the white man, learning everything my father knew about him. Really and truly, if anyone out there is qualified to talk about the white man, it's her. Unfortunately, she's never wanted to tell anyone about the white man. Her logic on it has been that some things are best not talked about unless they have to be, and that it'd be best if the white man stayed within our family. This morning, she finally responded to a text I sent her, and we began talking. Casual conversation at first, and then the white man. She, of course, thought I wanted to know to tease my father, but once I assured her I was just curious and suddenly a bit nostalgic for the stories, she let up a bit, under the condition that I wasn't making fun of him somewhere online. Well, I'm not making fun of him, so I didn't exactly lie to her. Before I go on, I will mention that I did ask, jokingly, if there was a reason we didn't talk about the white man. Would he appear if you thought about him? Would it make him stronger or spread some curse? No, she responded. It's just, why would you want to talk about and share something evil like that? So before anyone asks, I've not cursed you. It's not some Hello Molly shit where the white man is now inside your head. Anyway, when my sister was about 6 or so, she had a cat named Boo. It was a big, angry, caramel-colored tomcat and mostly contained inside. He only got out when my mother would try and get him castrated occasionally. Then, like a sixth sense, he'd find a way out and be gone for a few days until the appointment was well past and she'd have to reschedule. No matter what my mother did, she could never get Boo to the vet. If she put him in a dog crate for a few days before the appointment, he'd either get out the day before she went to put him in the cage, or he'd get out when she opened the door, biting and scratching if he had to. Other times, she'd lock him in the guest bedroom's bathroom, and then lock the guest bedroom too, giving her 2 doors to prevent any escape. Even then, he'd find a way out, somehow slipping his fat self out the window, which he could open just a few inches. Once he was outside, he was usually gone, like I said. Sometimes he'd linger around the house in places where no one could reach him. Once he did just that for 2 days, hiding on top of the shelf in the backyard and moving to the other side whenever my mother tried to get the ladder and grab him. Eventually, frustrated, she asked my father to get a fishing net and get the cat. She would have done it herself, but my mother was a tiny, angry woman and found it difficult to wield a cat. My father refused, not wanting to get involved in a man's fight for his nuts, and that would lead to the biggest argument my parents probably ever had. What caused it to get so heated, I don't know. I don't know why over the 20 years they were married, this was the one thing they really argued about. And this was the one thing my father stood his ground on. I don't know why they were so passionate about kitty balls. The argument lasted for days. Some part of my sarcastic preteen mind was preparing how I'd tell people my parents divorced over this. Now it's worth mentioning this all happened in very late fall, a little after Thanksgiving, which had come fairly early that year. And of course, Old Man Winter and the snow thought this was a fitting time to come by, right in the middle of my parents' argument about Boo's protest atop the shed. Snow hit hard and fast in another lovely East Coast freak storm, and like a piece of paper, my dad's argument crumpled in the face of his greatest fear. Unfortunately, my mother was not such a lightweight about arguments and kept it going even when he no longer wanted to. The cat was no longer the issue. No specific thing was the issue. 16 years of shit was coming out all at once while the white man stalked around the house. Much like my mother, Boo did not back down from a fight, even in the face of snow or a supernatural white Gumby, and still he refused to come inside. More importantly, my father now refused to go outside and get him at all for any reason, which further heated the argument. While I had been amused by the fight almost, my sister was greatly distressed by it, at least partially because it involved her beloved cat, who was now freezing outside. On the first night of her snowstorm, and the end of Boo's second day on the shed, she was just settling down to go to sleep when she heard loud, scared meowing outside her window. Even at 6, this surprised her because the shed was far from our room, and this sounded like it was coming from directly below her. But she loved the cat, and so she got up under the assumption that Boo had gone down and wandered inside. She slipped to the back door and opened it, expecting Boo to be there or to come trotting around from the side of the building. But even in the dark and the snow, she could spot her cat on top of the shed outside, a light coating of snow dusting his fur and a rather displeased expression on his face. So of course she called the cat. He would not come down. Begrudgingly, she came back in and headed back to her room. What a fickle creature. Wanting it in one moment and then jumping back up there and refusing. No sooner had my sister gone back in bed and under her covers than the crying began again. Loud and sad under her window. Looking down this time, she sure enough saw Boo, so heavily covered in snow that he looked white instead of caramel in the poor lighting, but Boo nonetheless. With a sigh, she got back up again and went around to the back to let the cat in. But yet again, Boo was on the shed and refused to come in no matter how much she called. So back to bed she went again, only to once more have Boo under her window whining. This time, fed up with his shit, she opened her window and called out to him, telling him to go around to the door. Surprisingly, with an expression that seemed a little too smart for a cat too stupid to get off a shed and come inside, the cat turned and headed around towards the front door. Not quite the one my sister had in mind, but it was a door at least, so she headed down one last time to let the cat inside. Little kids all seem to have one flaw they can't overcome until they're older. Some kids can't pour a drink without making a mess. Some can't zip their coats. Some can't fasten their seatbelts. For my little sister, hers was putting on her shoes. She couldn't do it until she was almost 7, which was a few months after this story. With that in mind, my sister headed to the front door and found Boo, covered so thickly in snow he looked solid white, sitting just beyond our porch in the snow. No amount of coaxing or calling could get him to actually come inside. And finally, she decided to just head out into the snow and grab him and bring him back inside. Once she was within an arm's reach, just close enough to reach out and try and grab him, he began to back away. No hissing or running, just taking a step back for every once he took towards her, making a path back around the house. Despite being fairly bright, my sister saw nothing wrong with this cat's game and likely would have been up to play it much longer than she did, except for her feet began hurting due to being unprotected from the cold. So she made one last attempt to grab him, getting just a handful of cold fur before turning back around and heading back inside to try and put her shoes on. Boo had always been a little odd even for a cat, and she was certain trying to grab him like that would send him scurrying away. But instead, he headed back just one more step, and when she turned around, he followed her back to the house, making sure to be just a little bit farther from her the whole way. Even then, at that age, that made her a little uncomfortable. By the time she came back in, our mother had woken up from all the doors opening and closing. Our mother was less than happy to learn she'd been out, barefoot, chasing the cat, and refused to let her go back out again. Instead, she left her, insisting she not move from that very spot, and went to wake my father so he could finally get that damn thing in. With Boo following my sister, you'd imagine my mother had spotted him outside, but she didn't, for the cat only returned around to the front of the house once she'd left again. It was then that he resumed his miserable yowling, begging to be let in but refusing to come up the deck. Momentarily, my sister considered going against my mother's wishes and heading out once again to try and get him, for he sounded just so miserable. But some part of her was reluctant. After all, Dad would be up soon and surely he could take care of it. A few moments later, our father came around and asked where he was so he could go grab the cat. My sister pointed outside, only to find that the cat was gone again. Despite it, my dad headed outside to see if he was anywhere to be found in the front or side yard, but he simply wasn't. The footprints went under our deck but didn't come back out, and there wasn't a cat under our deck. My father eventually checked the backyard, only to find that Boo was up there on the shed again, miserable but silent. Expecting him to maybe be more willing to come in, our father went out to try and grab the cat, but that's when something stopped him. Something he didn't tell my sister for a few days. There were no cat footprints in the snow back there. No evidence he'd ever left the shed's roof. Furthermore, there weren't even any footprints on the shed, which meant to my father that the cat hadn't moved in some time, much less gotten up and down a few times. Nothing indicated Boo had moved at all. He came back inside, and my sister remarked he looked visibly shaken. He wouldn't say what happened, not then, but he crouched down to look my sister eye to eye and spoke slowly, practically talking down to her, something he never did. He wanted to make sure she listened to him this time. He told her to not go back outside, no matter how much Boo whined, to not try and follow him, to not even open the door for him. She was to stay up in her room no matter what. She whined a bit, but he wouldn't relent, and she eventually gave in and went back to her room, where she had a sleepless night due to the crying of Boo below her window. My father also had a sleepless night. He trusted my sister, but was afraid she'd try and go outside anyway, and so he sat up all night on the sofa, getting up only to check if Boo, the Boo on the shed, wandered in every so often. Eventually, just as it was about to get light out, he went to check on Boo one last time and saw something that didn't entirely surprise him. Boo was gone, but there were no footprints. He hadn't jumped off the shed or walked off. There was one patch, free of snow, where he had been laying. And other than that, there was no evidence a cat had ever been on the shed. Of course, we never saw Boo again, but perhaps mockingly, my sister would hear a cat yowling outside her window, one that looked an awful lot like Boo. For the rest of the storm, once the storm was gone, so was the cat. That's the only other big event my sister could remember, and it was one I remembered only small parts of. I remember the argument, the cat's disappearance, but I was never told of anything else that happened. She knows there were a few other stories, things my father only told Philly and never us, but she just knows of them, not what they were. Before anyone asks, I know Philly would refuse to tell me even now. Any secret between my father and uncle stayed between them. My sister may remember some things I don't, so I guess if anyone has questions and I can't answer them, I can ask her. And then some commenter says, did she ever see the not footprints? Someone else says, thanks for the read, OP. Someone else says, oh, also, does she believe this stuff is real? Broach this carefully because, well, she might think you're insulting him. Does she think the contract will end with your uncle? Someone else says, this is weird. I'm the guy that was talking to you about demons. What is weird to me is that it has shown itself to everyone but you. I don't remember that well, but your mom saw it when they were chasing the dog, didn't she? This thing is apparently now bothering Philly, and your sister came face to face with it in cat form. What if, when it's done with Philly, it goes to your sister? Then it shows itself to you. But you just don't know it. Watch out, OP. And then the OP answers these questions saying, texted her, she believes she's seen them, but not for some time. And then he also says, glad you enjoyed. The OP then says she believes it's real and has since we were kids, And finally, the OP says, I suppose that's true. I've never seen it, but my sister and mother both did, although not in its regular form. And Philly may be getting stalked by it now. Hopefully, if it does exist, the contract ends with Philly and not with us. And wow, what a great 4chan thread with that one. The white man. The OP's father owes the white man. That is the classic 4chan story. Hopefully a lot of you haven't heard it before, but I did read that a long time ago on the channel, but I just wanted to reread it here and give it the justice it deserves. And yes, a lot of you guys are saying, why is this in a true 4chan threads video? Well, I don't know. I feel like I would just believe the OP. And what I do believe that happened here was the OP's father was mentally unwell, like the OP did mention a few times, saying his father may have been crazy. And that very well could have been. And you may be asking, well, what happened with all the misfortunes that happened? Well, that's a great question. But maybe the father and the OP's father just experienced so much hardship and bad luck throughout his life that his brain created some creature, something to put the blame on. That he had this contract with this imaginary thing, whether the OP's father had some sort of mental issue or this was some sort of weird coping mechanism. Could it be true? Yes. Because only really the father saw it. At the end, they kind of talked about it, saying everyone's seen it but the OP, but no one's really seen it except for the father. So is this some sort of weird coping mechanism for the father to cope with all of the horrible misfortunes his family has been through? Or is there truly a thing out there watching and waiting for the OP in the snow that has a contract and it will fulfill that contract no matter what? What are your thoughts? I thought this story was a masterpiece. I think it is an amazing story. Rest in peace, the OP's father. And hopefully the OP is doing all right. Hopefully the white man didn't come out of the woods and is stalking him now. But yeah, that's just a great thread. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And yeah, just a masterpiece. I love that story. I just got back from a job I had in Alaska about 2 months ago. I figure it makes a good story, even though it scared the shit out of me at the time. Be me, working as a radio technician, moving across the country semi-regularly to fill jobs. Get a contract to work at a undermanned radio station in Alaska. The flight was paid for and their supplies on site. There was a room for lodging, otherwise I'd have to pay for a hotel in the nearby town, which was a few miles away. I already didn't like the sound of a radio station in the Alaskan wilderness miles away from any civilization with less than enough workers. Despite this, I accepted the contract because it paid more than any job I'd taken before, and not having to pay for a hotel and for food was a plus. I had been instructed to take my gun with me on the trip, preferably a rifle that shot a large caliber. I ended up taking my Marlin 336W and 30-30 Winchester and taking an old shitty 22 I had with me for plinking. For your sake as a reader, and to shorten this story by about 3,000 words, I won't go into boarding the plane, getting the guns registered for travel, or establishing residency in Alaska. We land in Fairbanks. The radio station itself was in the middle of nowhere. They greatly underplayed how isolated this place was. It's southeast of Fairbanks, tucked in between the lower part of Donnelly Dome and the Macabre Plateau. The landscape is very hilly, mountainous, and rough. Most of all, though, it's cold as hell. Drive just over 2 hours and 107 miles from Fairbanks to Fort Greely. Charter a AS-350 Airbus helicopter to take me and my luggage to the closest inhabited area to the radio station. Hike with a local guide about 10 miles across tough and snowy terrain to the radio station. Guide stays there for the evening because a storm is setting in. While I got situated there, the guide, other staff, and I got acquainted. There was Kevin, the groundskeeper/janitor, who had grown up nearby in Delta Junction. He was 17 and was going off to college soon. Apparently, this was one reason the place was undermanned. The pay was over minimum wage, and beside from the technicians, all the jobs were entry level. Kids would work there during the summer and leave when they went to college. There was the guide, whose name I didn't catch, but a few of the others seemed to be familiar with. He was 30-ish and was one of 8 or so local mountaineering/hiking guides. There was also Nathan, a 20-year-old guy saving up to move to Anchorage with his girlfriend. He was the other radio technician. There was supposed to be another employee, but they stopped showing up about a month prior to my arrival. I put my stuff in the lodging room, go out to talk with the others and get a bite to eat. Enter the main room. Notice that the guide is gone. Hey, where did the guide go? Nathan looked over to me. Oh, he decided to leave since it was getting late. You just let him go during a storm? He insisted, said something about having to get home as soon as he could. I'm sure he's fine. He's a guide. He knows these mountains better than the bears do. I wasn't totally okay with this, but I decided Nathan was right and did not make an argument out of it. It bugged me from the beginning that a guide as knowledgeable as he was to just up and leave in a hurry during a storm. The bad news came about a week later. I had been doing my job as I normally would anywhere else, just with heavier clothing and occasional trips outside to restart the heater located in a mini shed near the station. The bad news, as you might guess, was about the guide. He had been found half a mile from the start of the trail leading up to the station. He had been partially eaten, but it was unclear by what or how exactly he died. This spooked us enough that Kevin asked me and Nathan to teach him how to load, fire, and maintain a gun just in case. We spent a few evenings going over basics. I let him carry around my shitty 22 as well. We all started carrying guns with us when we went outside and just around the station in general. Nathan had brought his 20 gauge M2 Benelli. It didn't completely ease the tension, but it made us feel safer. We got facts to document saying that an officer would come up to talk with us about the guide's death. A week passed, then another, repeating this process. It had eventually been 4 weeks and some days since the officer was supposed to be here. We weren't supposed to use the radio equipment for anything besides broadcasting the intended content, but we figured this was important enough to bend the rules. We got in contact with the local police station. Apparently, they couldn't locate a guide to assist an officer up to the station. They had sent one officer, but he hadn't reported back. They said that a blizzard was moving in and would be here within days. We told them what we knew about the guide before his death over the radio. They instructed us to stay put and wait out the storm. They told us to keep an open channel with them for as long as possible. 2 days pass, and around 2:30 in the morning, we lose contact with the police station. I work until 10 a.m. trying to get in contact with them. No luck. Kevin uses his ancient Nokia brick to call a local town's municipal center. His reception is shit. Every other call results in the call cannot be completed as dialed message. Get in contact with local government workers. Ask them to get into contact with the police station and let them know we're fine. Also ask them to get into contact with the contracting company. Nathan was ready to jump ship, and to be honest, I was too. For about 3 days we were stuck like that, not able to broadcast. Little contact with the outside world. I remember the day that we got the message like it was mere hours ago to this day. I've been trying to get some sleep during the storm. Since we couldn't do our normal duties anyway, I was shaken awake by Nathan, who told me to get up and come with him. When I finally came to my senses, I saw why he was so worried. The power is off. Not just the heat, the power. I get up and come into the main room where Kevin is sitting, wrapped in 2 heavy blankets and a puffy jacket. He has the 22 on the table and visibly loaded. What's going on? I asked. Power went out a few minutes ago. We heard something outside too. I loaded your rifle for you. My Marlin was sitting on the table next to a box of 30-30. What did he hear? Scraping. It sounded like something was trying to claw itself inside. Probably just an animal, but I'll go out and get the heater running. I went to the door with my rifle in hand. Open door. Snow falls into the doorway and the door is slammed back, closed by the wind. Fuck. We decided to wait out the storm the best we could, but we had to get warmer. Nathan and Kevin tried to start a fire while I gathered blankets, jackets, and any cloth or tarp I could find. I found about 5 blankets in total, as well as a few towels and a tarp. We huddled around the small fire, and about 4 hours later, the power returned. We assumed that this meant the storm died down a little, so once again I made my way to the door with my rifle. I opened it and a bit of snow fell in, but the door wasn't blown shut immediately. I walked out, trudging through multiple feet of snow. By the time I got to the shed, I was out of breath. I swung open the door to find the heater already running. Fuck. All that for nothing. I'm halfway back to the station when I feel it. That horrible sensation of being watched. I ran towards the station. As I neared the station, I picked up on a horrible smell. A musky smell, like a dog's hot breath. I bumbled in the door. "What the fuck is that smell?" I asked. I slammed the door shut. "I don't smell anything." I opened the door. "It must be out here then. Come smell it." "Dude, close the door, it's cold." The smell drafted into the station and cut off a sentence. Nathan and Kevin began coughing and gagging. I closed the door, thinking it could help. The air felt thick, like physically heavier than air is supposed to be. I began gagging uncontrollably. After about a minute of hell, it finally subsided as the ventilation system filtered it out. It lingered for days and never really went away entirely. We checked back with the people Kevin had called. No luck getting in contact with the contracting company. They did help us establish a connection with the police station. They said that the officer they sent up was still not back and presumed lost in the storm. We requested help to get out of there. We still had enough food and water for about 2 months. We asked about the possibility of a search and rescue team coming to get us. We only received a one-word response. Unlikely. We had packed our stuff by the door and got ready to sleep for the night. That night I woke up here with a harsh chill going through my body. I opened my eyes to see that there was snow everywhere. On the floor, on my bed, on me, all over the room. The door of the room was open, which I distinctly remember closing. I got up and ran out into the main room. The front door was wide open and I noticed that one of our packs was gone. I knew it was Kevin's because his was the closest to the door. My pack, which was next to Kevin's, had a large tear down the middle. It was a rough and uneven tear about the size of a bear's paw. There was some sticky black residue on the bag as well, which smelled like rotten musk combined in a horrible symphony of odors. I slammed the door shut and turned on the lights. I went to wake up Nathan and Kevin. Nathan woke up instantly when I shook him awake, but Kevin's eyes were frozen shut. We spent the morning putting hot water on his eyes and eventually got them open. He could see for the most part, but he complained of his eyes being freezing cold to the point of pain despite the rest of his body being warm, even hours after they had been open and warmed up. The next few days were pretty uneventful. Eventually, a team consisting of a police officer and 2 local mountaineering specialists came to pick us up. We were hesitant to tell them about the weird things that had happened to us, but eventually they inquired about our time there and we told them. They said that they got reports like that from people working at the station fairly often. They told us that they had never really had any reason to go up there and that it was just some kids getting spooked by their own shadow, but that this was the worst it had ever been. Even after we left that place, the whole ordeal wasn't entirely over. We of course had to speak to the police about everything, mostly about the missing people, but they wanted to know everything else as well. We ended up staying there for another month because of the police investigation, and because we had technically breached our contract with the contracting company and the broadcasting company. The contractors dropped all charges and we and the broadcasting company settled out of court. Even after coming home, some weird things go on that are directly related to this whole thing, if I ever tell the story. Whether that be online or in person, my dogs always act up if they are with me. Even when I'm not home, my neighbors, without fail, tell me that my dogs made a ton of noise. That could be a coincidence, or them trying to spook me, but I guess anything is possible. And alright guys, that wraps up some unnerving true 4chan threads. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and to be honest, I'm kind of running out of 4chan threads. I've read almost every single 4chan story out there. I've gotten into every single 4chan thread out there that's of note. So please comment down below if you know of any good stories I can get into, or point me in the right direction. Email me some good threads or stories if you know of any, because yeah, I'm kind of running out. So maybe this is the last in the series for a while, but I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Spotify, rate me 5 stars on Spotify, and all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, do all the things I just said. And thank you so much for watching. It means the world. This was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Every corner of Reddit has a story someone wishes they never told. Late night confessions, strange disappearances, and events no one can quite explain. In today's video, we're exploring the darkest corners of Reddit. If you enjoy deep dives into disturbing Reddit threads, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below and let me know if you'd like to see this turned into a series. Now, let's get into some disturbing Reddit threads. OP is scared about his daughter's imaginary friend. Posted on r/paranormal encounters. The first post read as, "I'm worried about my daughter's safety." Posted on March 5th, 2021. Hello. I couldn't sleep, so I thought now would be a good time to post this. So I have a 8-year-old daughter. I will be calling her Liana for the sake of my child's privacy. I am a single father, and it hasn't always been easy, but we have managed. Before the start of the pandemic, we had moved into a new house in northern Germany, which is close to my parents. Soon after we settled in, Liana started to tell me about her new friend, quickly telling me only she could see him. I brushed it off as she had always been creative, and since we were under lockdown, I thought it was normal. Especially since one of her friend's son also had an imaginary friend. Throughout the next few months, she would tell me about him, how he would come to play with her once I put her to bed, and he knew magic, and how his favorite color was blue. I started to get a little worried, as she seemed to know a lot about this friend. At first, I just thought it was because she was missing her real friends and my parents, so I started to spend even more time with her, even doing my work hours beforehand so I could spend the rest of the day with her. But she still kept talking about this friend. But everything changed 2 nights back. I had woken up randomly around 3 a.m. I could just feel something wasn't right. So I got up and went to go check on Liana. She was sleeping in her bed, though her blankets were a little different than how I had left her. I figure she had just moved. But as I was leaving, just in the corner of my eye, I saw a figure in the window that looks out into the woods outside of our home. I looked at it for a good 2 minutes before it simply disappeared. I really couldn't figure out what it was. Some part of me was thinking it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But that day, I asked her to draw me a picture of him. And after 20 or so minutes, she gave me this. I don't even know what to make of it, to be real with you. I sent it to my mom in the single dad group I am in, and they all said it was scary as hell. I really don't know what to do at this point. I am becoming worried for my child. I am just hoping this really just is her mind, but I do not know anymore. Any suggestions or tips would be helpful, as I am also worried I am overreacting. In the picture his daughter drew him is what I assumed to be the daughter on the right-hand side, and then this figure with long fingers or nails and long toenails as well. Very, very creepy photo. And then there was some comments that people had on the post for OP. So one of the comments read, "In some old German books, like from Johann Weir, written in medieval German, a Witting is a child-thieving ghost/demon who steals them away from their family, like a fae or like Baby Yaga. It's evil, must be invited in, and they do no magic. Look at the picture. Blonde hair, yellow eyes, long nails, tall, and very evil. I'm writing encyclopedias on demonology and supernatural. That's why I know. I'll look up the books it's in and try to take pictures. I have over 4,000 research books on the subject, so it may take a while. Keep her near you always." And then the OP responds to this strange comment. "I don't think there's a way to describe my emotions at this moment. I haven't heard of this even when I looked up the name to try and get an idea of what it meant. I feel like I am going to pass out. My baby told me she invited him into the house. Please, please, I am begging you to send me anything you have. I'll take anything." And then the OP comments on his post again, saying, "If I'm being honest, that has been keeping me up most of the night. The thought of anyone really being around my child when I'm not there scares me. I am a very rational person, but after reading some of the comments, I'm definitely going to look into more paranormal aspects of this, especially how to make a very good point in this matter. There is still some part of me holding out on the overactive imagination, because that's something I know I can handle, even if that's just finding safe ways to get out of the house more. But I'm worried if it's not, what I'm even going to do. I don't have the finances to move or even stay in a hotel for a long amount of time. Should be up in an hour or so. And I do intend to have a conversation with her and try to piece some things together. I have seriously thought about getting a nanny cam, even before this, as she is a very active girl and has a few incidences where she needed some help after climbing onto something." And then the OP goes to another subreddit, r/mediums, and posts, "I'm worried about my daughter's safety." He posted that on March 5th, 2021. And the post reads as follows. "So, someone told me it might be a good idea to do this. My 8-year-old daughter has an imaginary friend, who is in the pictures above. He only comes to play with her at night, once I put her to bed. And he comes into her room according to her. I had a very serious conversation with her today, as I'm very worried as I fully believe I saw something outside of her window 2 nights ago. I just want some help for my daughter. She said his name is Wittig. I did a little digging, and it's an extremely old German name, which makes a little sense as we are from northern Germany, and we currently live here as well. But she's never been exposed to that name before, and I know no one in my family named that. All this started after we moved into our current home. If anyone could help me, I would deeply appreciate it. I have been told my child might be sensitive herself, but I don't know much on these things." And then someone replies to the post saying, "Child therapist here. This has red flags all over it. Get a bunch of flour and pour it all over the ground by her window. See if you can catch any footprints. Imaginary friends are more common for younger kids. By 8, she should be moving on to more age-appropriate peer play. I'm a believer in the afterworld, but we need to rule out physical causes too. I would highly recommend finding a trauma therapist specializing in play therapy to do an assessment. Meet with the therapist alone first to explain what is going on. I have worked on cases like this before and never found a physical cause. Determined and agreed it to be a spiritual form. Worked with a kiddo on expressing feelings about the figures/setting boundaries, how to cope if there is fear, etc. But not every therapist has an open mind." And then someone else comments on the thread saying, "What has she described their playtime being like?" And then the OP responds saying, "From what I can understand, it varies from playing with her toys to going outside and playing a game called Hidden. When I asked her what that was, she said it was a secret game, and that I can't play it or it wouldn't be a secret anymore." And then the original person who prompted the thread replied saying, "Okay, secret game does not feel like a good thing. This feels manipulative." And then the OP says, "I know. I am trying to get a bit more out of her after school. I don't think he think she in trouble." And then the person replies, "Yeah, tread lightly. I think you have the right mind frame and best interest for your daughter. You've got this." And then another response to the post. Someone says, "I would rule out the physical, then do quite a few things. Use the flour inside all the windows, or use baking powder. It can double as air freshener. Once you rule out a living person, in fact, whether or not you rule out a living person, secure that window. Spray the panes with salt water. the door sills and the window sills, all of them, without spraying the inside door entrances. Do not tell your daughter what you are doing or why. There is no point in frightening her or making her feel bad. Verbally refuse him permission to enter your home. Announce that no energy, living or deceased, is allowed in your home without your express knowledge and permission. Tell him the hidden game is not allowed. Ask for the help of archangels to remove him. They seldom act without being asked. If Michael is asked, and Wicked is not a positive energy, consign him to Michael to do what Source wishes to do with him. Forbid him to play the hidden game, aloud and firmly. If he needs help, Michael will help if he is asked. If you need someone to intervene and the local medium is not available, I will help if sent a private message or a chat request. All offers of help in this sub must be offered free, so that is assured. It is a good sign that she is not frightened, but as a mama bear who is a medium, I, like you, investigate and protect my children in any way needed. I did not tell them what I was doing. There was no point in informing them when they were small. Follow the directions of smudging your home and follow those exact same steps with salt. What I saw was a blonde man, perhaps middle ages, straight hair that is dirty, wearing tattered clothes and a leather apron around his waist, 30 to 35. Leather shoes that are tied to his calves. He seems to have dried blood around his abdominal area. He had other wounds. But your daughter does not see that. I believe he died defending his home. He seems to be a human spirit. He was outside and attacked. He raised pigs. He farmed. He was outside the window because you do not allow him inside the home. Custom would dictate he can only cross your threshold as an invited guest. He would need to enter through the front door. So the fact he uses a window bothers me. He appears disheveled in the sense he appears to be a man whose hands and clothing are soiled from working outdoors. He can only enter with permission. Deny him permission. It is a good idea to involve a medium there locally. It is even better not to warn Wittig or your daughter. If he has her best interests at heart, a medium will be able to sort that out. The hidden game concerns me. He knows better. Forbid him to play it. It may have been a way he taught his children to hide from raiders. However, your daughter should not be hiding from you. Sometimes souls refuse to cross over, and they are trapped in loneliness. Their desire is to feel something, overcomes their judgment that is inappropriate to approach a young child. I saw souls at your daughter's age. I was seldom frightened. However, I had ancestors guarding my family. Usually these souls want help, or at least sense they exist. Children have bright and beautiful souls. They are much more accepting than adults. This soul needs help, but not from a child. If he can be crossed over, it would be best for all concerned. If he does not appear to be untidy, I would be more inclined to believe he was a spirit guide. I do not see that being the case. I wish you and your daughter the best in life. I am so glad that you listen to her and that she tells you what she experiences. You may have a psychic child on your hands. Many blessings, sir. A parent's love is the strongest love that exists. And that post was from a psychic, I guess, who believes they could see the man that was visiting his daughter, which I don't know if you guys believe. I would call it kind of BS, but I thought it was worth noting for this thread. Anyways, to another post OP posted. I'm worried for my daughter's safety update. Posted on March 9th, 2021. So after a bit of a delay, the update. I think it should state the reason for the disappearance. Through a comment given to me by a response, I was informed that it is a demon ghost, whatever you want to call it, that is known to steal children. Without saying, they sent me into a state of panic as I would like to think any other parent would feel. I didn't leave her side until she left today. She was supposed to leave on Monday for my parents' house, but something came up and we had to wait until today. Without saying, I collapsed shortly after she left. I hadn't slept more than 40 minutes every night. Before I go into our conversation, I'm getting the house completely cleansed by a Catholic priest. He's coming over tomorrow and then plan to have the place cleared out with sage. And I'm doing basically everything I've been told to do. Even planning to get a rose quartz gem to place outside her window. She is very much aware that something is wrong at this point. as I had her sleep in my room for the last few days and could tell I got very paranoid at night. I told her that there have been a few burglaries in the area and was just worried. I also planned to be getting a nanny cam for her room just as extra security, just in case it doesn't leave after all of this. The original post I'd meant to share. This morning, after she woke up and ate breakfast, I decided to sit her down and ask her about her friend, mostly asking simple questions. The main ones were, what was his name? Has he ever asked you to do bad things like hurt herself or me? And if she was scared of him. She told me he said to call him Wittig, which is a name I've genuinely never heard of in my life, and that he never told her to do anything bad or hurt herself or me. Like I said, I was informed that this is a demonic entity that steals children, and she's only ever been scared of him once. Of course, I asked why, and she proceeded to tell a story of when he started to come over to play. She said it's a few hours after I put her to bed, and she was having a hard time falling asleep, but she noticed something outside and had gotten up to investigate. Apparently, he slowly started to move to the window until he was right in front of it and just stared at her. Like he was, in her words, very sad and upset. So, of course, being the sweetheart child, she wrote a small note and pressed it to the window asking if he was okay. And apparently, he shook his head no. She somehow managed to open the window a little bit and then asked why. She was told it was because he was very scared of the dark and had no one to play with. So of course, she offered to play with him. He told her he would look like that, but before he could, she had to invite him inside, which she did. This is when I start getting scared. She said after she did, he smiled and pushed the window open and crawled in on all fours, which made her very scared, and she started to cry. But apparently he comforted her and then did a magic trick. I, of course, asked her what the trick was, and she said he made all of the lights turn on in their room to show her he wasn't scary. I start to ask her more and what other magic tricks he had done, and they ranged from making flowers appear to taking both of the outside. Apparently, he also likes to show her the stars and moons, which is why she added them in her drawing. I'm starting to believe the latter, that this isn't just an imaginary friend. The amount of detail she went into, constantly referring to him being real, and just many other things. I am just glad she is out of the house until Thursday. I think it is very pissed off with me though. Starting a night ago, I woke up with huge scratches on my arms and horrific headaches which I've never had before, as well as having very strange issues while trying to translate this, having a bunch of random ones scattered throughout my writing. At this point, the pain doesn't really bother me. It's more of the fear of it trying to get to my daughter again. I don't know if I should tell her the creature's origins or if I should wait until she is much older to explain this to her. I will be trying to keep everyone updated, but tomorrow is going to be an extremely busy day, as I also plan to go to a crystal shop and just ask what crystals would be best to protect her. And we have never heard from the OP again, and wow, that is a terrifying story. To think, either way, whether you believe in the paranormal or the real, both ones are terrifying with how this is outlined. If it is real and some man is coming to his daughter's window every night and asking to be let in, that is obviously horrifically terrifying. And if this is some sort of paranormal entity that is possibly going to steal his daughter, that is also horrifically scary. I don't know what happened, and like I said, we've never heard from the OP again. But hopefully, OP and his daughter are safe. On to the next one. My stepfather killed my mother and then committed S-word. I don't know what to do. I don't really know what to say. The police just showed up in front of my door and told me my stepfather killed my mother. Thursday, July 23rd, 2020. I know this doesn't sound real. I have my boyfriend and my best friend here. I've known this for about 2.5 hours. it still doesn't seem real. I don't really know what I want to accomplish with this post, but I swear it is real. It's 3:51 a.m. in Berlin right now. We were trying to finish watching the movie that we started before the police rang at my door. I don't know what to do. Edit. The police just called me. My stepfather committed S-word. I wish I could destroy him. Right now, I just feel empty. And also, before I continue on with the story, I'm not saying S-word to be disrespectful. I just have to say that in order for you guys to even see this video, go to the Patreon for uncensored videos and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Not trying to be disrespectful, but just have to preface that before I finish on with this story. And anyways, the OP edited the post again, so edit 2. I don't even know why I'm posting here. I'm usually just a lurker. I guess I just want somebody to know. I feel like the whole world should know. My mother is the most amazing person, and she had always been my idol. I don't know how to feel. I'm in our apartment, and I feel like everything I see is her. My evening started so different. Everything started so different. I haven't slept yet. I don't know how I will, though sleeping is usually my talent. Mom wakes me up every afternoon if she feels like I'm sleeping too long, since I moved back in during the pandemic. Update. My stepfather killed my mother and then committed S-word. I don't know what to do. Posted Friday, July 24th, 2020. And this post was originally deleted by the OP, but recovered through the Wayback Machine. And the post read as follows. Hello. My last post got capped, so I made a throwaway account. It's been about 24 hours since the police stood in front of the door to my mom's in my apartment and told me that my mother is dead. I've cried so much today. I feel like it's been an ocean of tears. So much that I just feel empty now. I miss her. So fucking much. It still just feels like a bad dream. This can't really be real. Her death was on the news, and I saw a picture of a body in a blue body bag being rolled into the back of a wagon. That is my mother. In that bag. Oh my God. I'm going to run down what happened again. Maybe this will make it more real for myself? I don't know. My boyfriend and I were in the park playing speedmitten on Wednesday evening when my mom called me and told me she'd be coming home. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said yes, not to worry about it, and my boyfriend was still welcome to come over if he liked. I told her okay. I would see her in a moment. We both went home and she wasn't there. I wasn't worried. My stepfather and my mom have been together for a while and they're very much in love, but they can fight a lot sometimes. They always make up very quickly. I tried calling her several times to know if she wanted dinner and sent her text messages, and texted and called my stepfather as well. They didn't answer. This wasn't so unusual either. I thought they just made up. I'm guessing by this time, he had already stabbed her. I feel sick writing the sentence. The police showed up at 3 a.m, informed me, stayed in the apartment while my boyfriend called my best friend, who rushed over with a taxi. Everything is kind of a blur from then on. I remember sitting down to write the Reddit post because I didn't know how to feel or what to do, and I guess I wanted to scream my pain into the internet void. At that point, my stepfather hadn't committed S-word yet. He had taken his car up into the countryside where my mother has a tiny little house at the lake, which is her pride and joy, with her garden. Both of them went up there every weekend together. He committed S-word there. The fucking bastard. I've never been so angry in my life. I loved him. He was a part of my family. We got along really well. Some part of me wishes I could strangle him or scratch his eyes out. I just want to scream in his face. How he could do this to me. To her. My lovely mother. Fuck, she is such a fucking light. She is such an incredible person, and we are so close. I told her everything. And not just because she's my mother. She is truly an absolutely amazing person. Everybody who met her loved her. I stayed awake until about 6 a.m. I smashed a few glasses. I cried a lot. We finished watching the movie. Today I had to call all the people. my grandparents, her brother, her friends. I had to call my stepfather's children in the UK and tell them what happened. I can't imagine how hard it must be for them. My mother was the victim. Their father was the murderer. I feel so bad for them. I've gotten so many calls and messages from people who are offering to help me in any way I need, who cry on the phone and ask me if this is real. To have to tell people over and over again what happened really wrecked me. Especially my grandparents. My granddad. I don't know how he is going to get through this. He just kept screaming, "No, no, not my mom's name." I have to go to the police today to give a statement. Probably talk about their relationship. I have to be there in 4.5 hours, and I haven't really slept yet. I can't really eat either. I just feel like throwing up. Just thinking about food. I wanted to thank you all for the comments on my first post. I know we don't know each other, but I'm just some faraway voice on a screen with a terrible fate, but I did feel better reading your hugs and encouragements. I will have to think about getting a lawyer. My dad is sleeping in the other room. We're going to have to figure out how to go from here. Some part of me honestly doesn't see a point anymore. There's so much pain in my life. I've had so many bad experiences. I got through a R word and a drug problem, and everything was on its way up. And now this. But I love my mom more than anything, and I can't disappoint her. And I'm going to need to be here for my dad and me. I'm sorry for the long text. I just feel like I need to get something out. I feel so lost and empty. I miss my mom. Monday, August 17th, 2020. Hello, I guess in some way I wanted to give you people an update on what has been going on with me. When I posted my first post, I was slightly drunk. It was the night the police showed up at my house and rang the doorbell, and I was confused. All of your messages from random strangers, helped me in some way. I'd like to thank whoever sent me that poem by Mary Elizabeth Fry, "Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep." We used that for the invitation to her party. And also, Bionica, who painted that beautiful painting of her, which she sent me by email. Thank you. And then the poem, I'm not going to read it here just because it is quite lengthy, but I'll have it on screen so you can read it. It's a beautiful poem. And then the post goes as follows. Also, fair warning, this might be quite a long post. This might trigger someone, and I've been writing this post over several days as more information keeps trickling in, and the picture of that night is becoming clearer and clearer. I think I'm also mainly writing this for myself. What happened that night, the 23rd of July, is just still so surreal. I'm sitting at my mother's desk right now, in her little office in our apartment that I grew up in Berlin. Her presence in some way is all around me. It has been 23 days since the police showed up in front of my door at 3 in the morning and asked if they could come in, since my stepfather committed S-word. Everything has been so confusing. It's all sort of a mixture between crying, screaming, yelling, throwing things, and just emptiness. I go through phases. Someone linked the famous post about grief and God. It's so accurate, and it's really hard to cope. Since that night, I haven't ever actually been alone. This is somewhat exhausting to me in some ways, but probably also very important. I'm going to go through these series of events and facts because I also want to set it right. Since the media, since some of you found the articles online and connected the dots, there is so much false information. It's hard to believe. My mother and my stepfather were together for 8 years, and he has only been living in Berlin since then. He has children from his previous marriage. That is all I will say. I am my mother's only daughter. He did not call me and confess to what he did, as many report, but he called some vaguely mutual friend who he walks his dog with sometimes. This was sometime after 11 p.m. At this point, he was already up at the summer house. It takes about 1 hour and 45 minutes to get up there. This means my mother had been dead for about 2 hours. It says so in the police report as well. The summer house did not belong to my stepdad, but to my mom. She poured all of the little money she had and renovated it by hand. It does not in any way belong to him. The police showed up at my mom's and my apartment late at night. They didn't know the address of where he might have gone, and were also worried he might come and harm me since he had the keys to our apartment as well. I was watching a movie with a friend of mine. I posted on Reddit a few hours later. The news articles started coming out the next day, connecting my stepfather to a celebrity. I posted because I needed help. This celebrity and my stepfather are by no means friends. They are acquaintances, and there's no reason for him to be brought into any of this. That was Wednesday night/Thursday morning. On Friday, I was at the LKA, Criminal Police, and gave a 3-hour statement about them and their relationship. This next part is about my feelings and mainly about my mom. Feel free to skip it. Since then, my whole world has been turned upside down. My mother, the person I honestly loved most in the world, was just torn from me. It feels like I have this big bleeding hole inside of me. I'm not crying all the time. Sometimes I feel okay, but more like empty. My mother has been with me my whole life. The whole 21 years, and I'm not just saying this because she is dead. She is honestly the best mother you could wish for. She is goofy and caring, her laugh is infectious, and she has such integrity. She's the most animated person. When she tells a story, she will get up from the table and gesture all around. Her eyes are so shining. I think I might show some pictures of her because I want people to recognize her beauty. I want the whole world to know she is gone. Because this is an honest and devastating loss to the world. Believe me. She is so talented. She got her bachelor in art of history in America. She has worked odd jobs all her life. She's always been a hippie. When I was little, she started working at this English language summer camp in Thüringen in Germany, and she used to take me there for many weeks with her, on a hill, on a farm, in the middle of a giant forest. She's a magician in the kitchen. She can open the fridge door and magically make something out of the leftover ingredients that nobody would ever think tastes good. Noodles and carrots, anyone? She likes to make everything herself. She would let milk go bad and make her own ricotta. I have 1,000 jars of her homemade chutneys and jams. She baked her own bread years before the pandemic. She made her own vinegar, her own syrups and alcohol, and her hot sauces are legendary. I used to come home and open the fridge door, and I'd ask her which of the many bowls she had covered with little plates were edible, and which weren't ready yet. Since she's dead, I have found so many started experiments of things I don't even know what they are. I wish I could ask her. There are so many things I wish I had the time to ask her. And then the emotional part continues for a few more paragraphs, and I just wanted to read a little bit of the emotional part because I think it's, important to understand what OP's going through. I think this post and thread in general truly is something obviously disturbing and horrible, but it's insightful to what it's like to go through something like this. And I think it's important to, understand who the victim was. And it's just horrible, but anyways, back to OP's thread. It's important to preface that I knew their relationship, or to be more exact, I was the closest to both of them together. And it's important to understand that he wasn't some creepy, abusive, scary bad guy. I loved him. He was like a best friend to me. When he came into my mother's and my life, I took him in with open arms. I've confided in him. I've told him secrets. We've had running jokes. We made bets with each other that I usually won, and he had to pay up. He was my family. This makes me feel just as conned. I feel cheated. I feel like I've been blind. I've had bad fights with them as well, and I knew about their fights, but I didn't see this coming. Not even a little bit. I would never put my mother in harm's way. I guess this is why she must have kept things hidden from me. The murder happened in his apartment. They had separate apartments. And afterwards, he drove his car up to my mother's country house that they both spent every weekend at, hunting mushrooms, planting and building things, going swimming in the lake that's right in front of the door. This was their refuge, and I'm assuming this is the reason he went there. Since the day this has happened, I've always assumed he blew up about something, lost control, and he killed my mother while he wasn't clear-headed. This is what made sense to me. Then he committed S-word because he killed my mother, because he didn't know how to continue. But the more time goes by and the more facts we uncover, we being my mother's friends and I, not the police, the more it seems it was the opposite. That he killed my mother because he wanted to commit S-word. and that he was covering something up. Since the night the police showed up, they've been asking me if I could know where their laptops are. They both had a laptop, and both are missing. They found the empty cases, but they're gone. This sparked suspicion in us. His phone is gone as well. My mother's is not. The police gave it to me. Then there are the other facts. Despite what is said in the media, she didn't have multiple stab wounds in her chest. There was only one very precise and very small wound that caused her death. He only let someone know what he did after he was up at the house. When he arrived at the cabin, he apparently parked normally, even greeted one of the neighbors. The pieces are falling into place. That this was cold-blooded. I don't really know why I'm writing all this down in a Word document and why I'm going to post it on Reddit, but I need to share. I feel so much hatred and so much anger. I feel it boiling underneath my skin and it keeps threatening to come out. I've smashed so much stuff. I've gotten so angry. Sometimes I snap and I scream at people, and other times I just cry and beat my pillows. And sometimes I'm very calm. I can still feel joy. And my mother had this amazing circle of friends that I've known my whole life and who are supporting me. I saw her body in the coffin, and I will never be able to get that image out of my head. She was so tiny. It breaks my heart. I've also slept 2 nights at the cabin, and in the dark, every shadow looks like my stepfather. I've become scared and started locking my doors at night. Murder used to seem something so far off. Something that happened to other people, in a different world, separate from mine. But now it's not. And I won't let him spoil her place, her house. I won't let him take that away from her and from me. I refuse. I just miss her. I miss everything about her. It hasn't been that long yet, and all I want is for her to hug me and say my name and say she loves me and that she thinks I'm an amazing young woman. I want her to cuddle with me in bed, which she did for so many years until I felt myself too old. I want to sit at the kitchen table in the morning with her and have her ask me what I dreamt about last night and have both of us talk about our dreams. For her to talk with me about my story ideas and my poetry, and to talk with her about the book that she was writing and will never finish. It just hurts so much. I don't know how to ever get past this. She has always been the most amazing person I know, and I can't get over this. I don't know how to get over this. I feel lost. I feel like I have to grow up very fast now and carry her with me. There's so much more to tell. So much. But I should probably stop somewhere. I would appreciate all advice. Thank you for reading. And then OP shares some photos of her and her mother. Very, very sad. And just kind of makes it more real. I don't know. But yeah, very sad story. And I feel so sorry for OP and what she's had to go through. And then she makes another post. 3 years later. She said, "Hey everyone. Imagine my surprise scrolling through Reddit on my living room couch this fine afternoon when I see a little picture of my mom and me in my feed. Was not expecting that at all. And then to look further down and see all of these wonderful and heartfelt comments underneath. I could not believe it. And I actually started crying again. This is the reason I reached back out into the void, as I called it, at my darkest time, and Reddit reached back and gave me something to hold on to. When you lose your faith in humanity in that way, I needed the love that came from so many strangers all over and the support. Yesterday was actually my birthday. I just turned 25, so it has been a bit over 3 years, and I can't believe that 3 years have passed. I can't stand to believe that much time has passed without her. Thinking about it makes it hurt more. I miss her so much. Thank you to everyone for worrying about me and wishing me well. I'll give a quick update, and one of these days maybe sit down and write something more out. I've been in therapy for almost 2 years now, and I have a wonderful therapist that helps me greatly. It took me a while to find her, and there was a lot of trial and error with former therapists, but she's amazing, and I'm so happy I have her. She actually says that I have improved greatly in a number of things. I'm a mess, though my mother's murder is something that I've buried very deep down below in the darkness of my psyche, and we haven't quite reached it yet. My therapist says it's more important not to force everything out at once, but to go step by step. She says that I'm protecting myself by keeping it numb. I think I agree. I do feel a particular kind of numbness ever since that happened. A few times during a session, we cracked through that wall, and what spilled out was, well, horrifying pain. So I'm fixing everything else that needs fixing, slowly and steadily, and it's going very well. I feel like I owe this to my mother, since I seem to have a tendency to get myself into toxic relationships as well, and I'm not ready to go down that path any longer. Hence myself taking a break from relationships. I think a comment mentioned that I said that in my podcast. Shortly after my mother's murder, I got 2 cats, since my mom and I had cats growing up and she loved them so. One of them looks exactly like the reincarnation of our cat Nos, which I know she'd love. I still live at home and I live in her room now, with all of the hundreds of books she collected and my own collection of novels I've added. My father and I held on to each other tightly throughout these last few years. I honestly don't know what I'd do without him. He's my rock. My father threw himself into working on the cabin. I think he loves being out in nature, but I think he also loves feeling like he can do something for my mom. Every time he drives up, he brings flowers, and we have a little picture of her leaning against a tree with a candle in front of it, and he puts them there. I also know my mom would be positively thrilled with seeing everything we've done. I really feel her up there, and have completely eradicated my stepfather from that place. It started out with stubbornness, but by now I just really believe there's nothing at that house of him, and if there was, it can go and fuck right off. I'll post some pictures with a link later. I'm very lucky because I have some absolutely lovely friends. Especially in the past few months, I've recognized just how amazing they are and how much support I have coming from there. Sunday evening, I planned to celebrate my birthday in a park in Berlin, and I was so touched by how many people showed up. I teared up multiple times throughout the night. We spent a lovely night drinking and playing Cards Against Humanity and Werewolf. Germans will know what I'm talking about. My closest friends, J, E, and T, helped me so much with setting it up. T baked me a cake exactly like my mother used to make me, after very slyly getting me to talk about it a few weeks later. A lot of bad things have happened in the past few years, I can't lie, but also many good things, and I continue to fight on. If you guys are interested, I can give an in-depth report also on what else we found out back then, but I should probably get up off this couch and go enjoy the last Berlin sun rays. This also got way longer than I expected. Thank you all for your lovely comments and well wishes. And I'm glad that disturbing post ended up on a positive note, as positive as it could be. I mean, I can't imagine what OP went through. Having her mom get murdered and her stepdad commit S-word after killing her mom. I mean, horrific, but I'm glad it did end on a semi-positive note, and I just hope OP's doing well nowadays. On to the next one. I shot my stalker tonight. Posted on September 24th, 2014. And this was all recovered with the Wayback Machine. And the original title was, Anyone Had Success with Private Investigators? For the past 6 months, I have been relentlessly stalked and had threats against my life made from someone I dated for a month. It started with phone calls, upwards of 45 to 50 a day, 50-page text messages, and him showing up outside my house at 5 a.m. When I would not comply or feed the negative attention, I began to receive threats, claims that he would murder me and get away with it. All he would do is have to flee the country, telling me he shouldn't have to force me to be his friend or give him another chance or else. Every time I blocked his number from contacting me, he would then call me from different ones, try and pretend to be other people, or have his friends or sometimes even random strangers he'd ask on the street. I once scared an unsuspecting guy half to death after informing him that the person who had just told him to call me was actually stalking me, and I sent him proof. He ended up calling the police on him. He fled, of course. After about 2 months of that, I was evicted from my apartment building due to my neighbors no longer feeling safe because of his looming presence. I then applied for and was granted a TPO. A few days afterwards, I received a picture message of the note that the sheriff's civil had left on the door of my stalker's then residence, with a message taunting me that what you are trying to do is stupid, and a restraining order is just a piece of paper. So ultimately, he just ended up avoiding the process server, and simple as that. I was not being protected at all. May 31st of this year, I relocated. This did not deter my stalker. He vowed to find wherever I moved to and threatened that if he couldn't find me, he'd be able to find my family and then proceed to send me a map of my mother's home, whom he had never met. I received a message from a woman claiming to be a former landlord, letting me know that I owned a balance on my account, and to avoid late fees, I needed to pay the amount, which I would do with the link provided in the message. Turns out, it was my stalker pretending to be a woman, and the link turned out to be a tool used to grab the user's IP address when the link was clicked. Upon this discovery, I changed my phone number and began to systematically dismantle any trace of my online presence I once had. This action only seemed to anger him, and before deleting the profiles outright, I would attempt to block him from contacting me. Each and every time I blocked one, he simply created a new one and proceeded to contact me as if nothing had happened. 12 different Reddit accounts, 9 different Tumblrs, 10 different Instagrams, 3 Meetup accounts, 4 Facebooks, with which he changed his location to that of my hometown and proceeded to add nearly everyone from my graduating class in high school, and even 3 Duolingo accounts and MySpace. Yes, MySpace. I then received an empty package from him addressed to my former residence with the declaration, "Address correction requested. Do not forward." I'm assuming he thought that the post office would adhere to his requests and return the package to him with my new corrected address on it. Mid-July, he created a profile using my photos and likeness to threaten my family. When I didn't respond, he proceeded to post semi-nude pictures of me on the profile in an attempt to blackmail me into speaking with him. I did not and contacted Twitter to report the accounts and have it removed, which they eventually did. On August 21st, 2014, I awoke around 8 p.m. to vigorous knocking and ringing of my doorbell. I look out my window and to see who it is, and I was horrified to see my stalker there. I called the police, and of course he fled once again. Over 7 separate police reports filed. This incident was followed by threatening emails from my stalker, demanding that I meet him somewhere, or because he had found me that next time I would wake up to gunshots, and that if I didn't, he would first taser you and R-word you in the ass using your boyfriend's blood as lube. This past Sunday night, I woke up at 6:45 a.m. to the ringing and banging again. I proceeded to record him on video while I was on the phone with the police. He fled on foot once again, and I was hit with the same hoopla from law enforcement. Well, we can't really do much because technically at this point, he's not doing anything wrong. Then why does he flee, I wonder? I obtained a TPO again, but I have no solid address for this dangerous person, which is why I am in dire need of a private investigator to assist with finding said residence, so this person can be served. I hope you might be able to refer me to someone who might be able to assist me. I've developed insomnia, depression, anxiety, and paranoia. I am completely isolated. I am 22 years old and I have no social life anymore. I have 0 friends. I've become a shell of my former self. I faced eviction and lost a job because of this man's behavior, and I don't know how much longer I can survive. There's actually so much more filler shit that he has done to terrorize me, but for the sake of this already lengthy post, I tried to condense it. I have proof in the form of recordings, event diaries, and copies of all of his threats, interactions, and attempts to communicate, and would be more than willing to email them to show I'm not lying. I am in LV if that helps at all. And then she gives a too long to read, but crazy shit. And then there was some relevant comments. Someone commented, "Can you post the video?" And then OP said yes, but I'm on the phone with the police during the video. I'm not 100% sure how to blurt out certain information like my address and my phone number from the audio in the video. And then some more comments on the post 3 days later on September 27th. Someone says, "Damn, I remember talking to an old friend of mine from Vegas who was saying she'll get a CCW soon. I kind of think I should forward this to her. Soon just doesn't seem soon enough. And then OP says, do it. My gun saved my life. And then OP posts again on October 8th, 2014, 2 weeks after the original post. And then she attached an image, and the image is a photo of a slightly open door. The chair is in front, pushed to the side, and then black paint on the side is covering the side of the door that has been busted in. Arrows, most likely from crime scene units, are stuck to the door, pointing to individual spots. And then the OP writes this on the thread. And I had to get this from Imgur because she deleted the original thread. And the post read as follows. I'm writing this staring at the mess the police left for me, in a bit of a fog. After 6 months of stalking and threats against my life, my stalker finally snapped and decided to kick my door in and make good on his promise. Out of fear, the past month I'd begun sleeping with a chair propped against my front door to give myself a few extra precious seconds in case of emergency. I shudder to think how differently things might have turned out if I had not barricaded the door. I awoke around 1:15 a.m. to the sound of the door giving way after one kick, followed by the sounds of my stalker struggling to dislodge the chair while forcing his way inside. I jumped up and grabbed the gun I've learned to do everything, even shower with. I stood at the top of my stairs and fired twice, hitting him in the chest. I hear his scream, his disbelief that I'd stood up for myself. 0 to 100 in milliseconds. I've never been so afraid in my life. I do not know if he is living, but I do know the police have him, and that's what helps the most. 4 months of him evading the police, I began to question whether he was unstoppable, untraceable, Houdini. He would murder me and get away with it. As of now, I'm in a haze of guilt, surprise, relief, and disbelief. I shook as the canines drag him out of his hiding place under a bush. I survived, where so many people do not. Holy shit, I survived. Edit. The outpouring of support is wild. I can't thank you guys enough. Everyone can be a critic, and the fact still remains. You don't know what you will do in a situation until it's presented in front of you. Those who believe there was other things to be done have never had someone tell you that you no longer deserve to draw breath and mean it. As for the should have fired a warning shot folks, there are no warning shots. A gun is a deadly force. You only pull that trigger if you are in fear for your life and all the other methods of deterring are gone. When he kicked my door in, there was no longer a deterrent preventing harm. Warning shots are dangerous and could hurt the unintended. This is not a Wild West movie. That's what responsible gun ownership is. I'll update once things have calmed down a bit, I promise. I'll write back to everyone, and after being isolated for so long. Anyone who wants to be friends, I am always accepting those. And now we get to the news article. So, OP isn't lying. I mean, I don't think she would lie. I wasn't thinking that, but, all legit. And I'll read through the news article real quick, which was posted on October 2nd, 2014. Las Vegas, Nevada. A woman shot her stalker after he kicked in her back door. She had been living in fear, showering with a gun, and propping up a chair against her door for just this sort of situation. Her post to Reddit made the story go viral. She writes, I'm writing this staring at the mess the police left for me, in a bit of a fog. And then it continues to what we read just earlier. Police say former boyfriend Douglas Eugene Jackson, who is 22, kicked in her door at around 1 a.m. last Friday. I awoke around 1:15 a.m. to the sound of the door giving way after one kick, followed by the sounds of my stalker struggling, and you know the rest of the story. We just went over this. KVVU TV reports that Jackson left the scene and tried to hide in some bushes. Police dogs quickly found the stalker. He was treated for his injuries at University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. Jackson now faces charges of home invasion and aggravated stalking. For months of him evading the police, I began to question whether he was unstoppable, untraceable, and you know the rest. The victim does not wish to be identified. has saved many threatening texts and social media posts from her stalker. She says he forced her to move, obtain a restraining order, and acquire a license to carry a concealed weapon. The victim followed up with a note. The outpouring of support is wild. I can't thank you guys enough. Everyone can be a critic, and the fact still remains. You don't know what you will do in a situation until it's presented in front of you. Those who believe there was other things to be done have never had someone tell you that you no longer deserve to draw breath and mean it. And then it continues to what we just read. And then the Daily Mail has an article on the case, along with the text evidence submitted by the OP. And I'm going to read through some of the texts real quick, which are just crazy. So the OP says, "Leave me alone. That's all." And then the stalker says, "I love you. I'm at my friend's apartments now. It's right down the street by yours. I'd like to see you. Why are you being so anti-Doug? Doug is good people. Doug says he's coming over there now." And then he says, "D, or then live your life, enjoy it. I may do what I feel I need to because obviously we can't be civil anymore. I'm about to ruin your life. Right about. Want to end this? Cops everywhere. Cops everywhere. Yo, not cool." And then a update on the case in 2020, which was 6 years later. Reno, Nevada. A Nevada man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to stalking a female acquaintance while on parole for a similar crime that happened in Las Vegas. The Washoe County District Attorney's Office in Reno announced the sentence for 28-year-old Douglas Eugene Jackson on Friday. Jackson was arrested in Florence, Arizona in January and pleaded guilty to the aggravated stalking charge in July. According to prosecutors, an investigation by the Sparks Police Department determined Jackson had sent numerous threatening text messages to a woman over several months in 2019. The texts included threats against the woman's dog and property. He also called the woman's family and friends in an effort to get information about her. At the time of the threats, Jackson was on parole for stalking a former girlfriend in Las Vegas. That woman ended up shooting him at her home. According to the district attorney's office, prosecutor Travis Lucia sought a maximum sentence because of the terrifying nature of Jackson's conduct, which came only after 1 month on parole for the previous crime. Jackson was living in Washoe County at the time of the threats, but had no steady address. And I think it's just insane that he only got 15 years. Luckily, he got the maximum sentence, but I mean, what do you think he's going to be doing when he gets back out again? He got in trouble for it. He got shot for it and then arrested, and then he did it again. What a complete piece of trash. I mean, he's going to do the exact same thing in 15 years. What? I mean, it's already been 5 years since then, so he's only got 10 more years left. God, I hope, something happens and he stays longer in there because, yeah, I mean, he's going to go terrorize another poor woman, and people like that just need to be locked away forever. Went for a tire change. Found a tracker under my car. Placed by my roommate. How do I go about this? Posted on r/relationship advice. I'm a 25 female. My roommate is a 34 male. I moved to a new town last year. Only knew one person. Stayed with her for a bit until I found a house to rent, but I needed a roommate. She introduced me to a guy she worked with who also needed a roommate because he just got a divorce. I met him first. Didn't get weird vibes. Seemed nice enough. About 6 months ago, he made the suggestion to be friends with benefits, and I made the stupid mistake of agreeing. We both did not want a relationship. Everything was fine until he started getting weird and staying up until I got home, questioning me about where I had been and who I was around. I then ended the hooking up, told him I didn't think it was like that. He got mad. Everything was fine for a bit, until yesterday. I live in a pretty rural area where most businesses are small and family owned. Since not a lot of people are getting out, I decided to go ahead and get some new tires and support a mechanic shop I go to. since I doubt they're getting regular business at the moment. I'm there waiting when the guy comes over and tells me he wants to show me something. I'm like, okay. We go over to my car and he bends down and points under at a black box. He asks me if I know what this is and tells me it's a GPS. It took me a second to understand the implications of a GPS being under my car. I was like, so someone put it there? It's clear I have no idea why it's there. And he actually got concerned and told me if I didn't know, I needed to find out. I feel so creeped out because I have no friends here. The friend I knew moved away. I only know some people at work, but we're not friends, and it's been hard to meet new people. There's no other way a GPS would be on my car unless my roommate put it there. Now I'm freaked out in a way I've never been before, and I can't move out. I'm scared to ask him about it. I have no one to stay with. No family here. What do I do? Do I just ask him about it outright? I left the GPS there because I don't want him to know I know at the moment. What do I do? And then some comments under this post read as follows. That is really creepy. Start planning your exit. Document everything. Someone else said, I would be concerned there are cameras in your bedroom and bathroom. Honestly, I would not feel safe to return home. I would immediately call the police and file a report. There are devices you get from a spy store that can scan for the frequency of hidden cameras, but I would not even waste my time with that. My peace of mind would be worth a terminated lease and a breach in contract, which a police report would help you in civil court should you have to go. Run. Do not walk to the nearest exit. And then some people say, be specific as to how you know, not what you think or believe. But what actual proof do you have that your roommate put the GPS on your car? What I read is that some guy found something on your car. And then the OP said, it's a small magnetic tracking device. Who else would it have been? I know no one. And this place is too rural for any kind of crime organization like stealing cars. No one would steal my 7-year-old car anyway. And then someone said, maybe the car dealership put it there? I own it. I've had it for about 7 years, since I started college. Paid for it in cash outright. And then there was an update on the post on March 30th, 2020, the next day. Update, kind of. I'm going to put them here. I'm still reading through the comments. Thank you guys. There's really great advice I'm going to follow. PSA, I bought my car brand new 7 years ago and paid for it in cash. I've never owned anything on it. So last night I decided to subtly pack my things and plan on making the drive at some point today back to my hometown. He works during the day, but I work from home because my office is closed until at least this summer. I realized I could probably fit all of my stuff in my car, and since my lease ends in May anyway, so I'm just moving out. The only furniture that's mine, and not the landlord's or his, is my bed, and it's so old, so I think I'm just gonna leave it here. I went down to the police station earlier this morning and had them remove it. I don't think there's much they can do besides document it. They asked me some questions, and I said I didn't know, but I know no one here, and I think it might be my roommate. They said it looked like a cheap one from Amazon or eBay, and they'll check it out. Honestly, I may just end up staying home. I miss being in a familiar place where I know basically everyone in town, and I miss my friends. Working from home for a few months might give me enough time to switch jobs, so that's all I have for now. Thank you guys, I'll try to reply to people as well. And then some comments under the post. OP was replying to a comment and said, I've already gone to the police. Even if I told them, yep, totally my roommate did it, I know. I didn't, I simply strongly suggested it. That is not grounds for someone's life to be ruined. They wouldn't even take that as fact until it was proven. Even if they did definitive proof, I'd have to go through with pressing charges. If I did press charges, then it would be a simple misdemeanor. And at that point, if you got a misdemeanor, it would be rightly justified since it was all proven. And that's if I would even bother with charges in the first place. All of this minor things compared to if he was an insane loose cannon that could kill/hurt me if I just didn't mention his name. It's ignorant to not piece together the clues and be safe rather than sorry. instead of just saying, nope, I have no clue, because I do have a clue. And I know it's him. I plan on asking him later today after my 8-hour drive home, so I'm interested in hearing what he has to say. And then OP added an edit/update to the original post on March 31st, 2020, one day after the previous update. Update. Since I think it'll be lost in the comments, if anyone is curious, already mentioned I went to the police/home. All settled in now. Ended up asking him about it via phone. He admitted to it. Got freaked out when I said I gave it to the police. Said he was concerned for my safety when I would go places by myself after work. Yeah, okay. We got into a scuffle about it. He finally snapped and said that he knew I was seeing someone when I was hooking up with him. I wasn't, so yeah. My first experience with crazy, and hopefully my last. Parasite Man from r/confession. And a quick warning, this one is actually disturbing, disgusting, and if you get grossed out by stuff like food related stuff and people tampering with your food and drink, then yeah, just a quick warning, and let's get into this. My obsession hurts others around me. It's also my preference, but it goes far deeper than that. I'll try to explain the obsession the best I can by explaining how it started. Basically, when I was young, I caught pinworms. It was a strange feeling, and the itch was painful. My parents took me to the doctor, and I got medication to cure it. This event is what sparked my obsession. The thought that my body could be their whole world, their lifeline, almost a planet of sorts. It was so interesting. After that, I began researching pinworms and other parasites, and I found out the human body already hosts parasites such as demodex on their eyelashes, and I wanted to know how many a human body could endure without a chance of serious health issues. This curiosity has plagued my mind for years. I'm now 25, but I am very well versed in parasites, as have been studying them for over 10 years. I also purposely infect myself with non-lethal parasites because it's part of a preference of mine. Some have worked better than others. Quite a few have given me serious diarrhea and fevers, while others have been much more bearable. I currently have pinworms and tapeworms, various non-pathogenic Pratzoa, and hair down there lice. I am incredibly masochistic, so although it's uncomfortable, I do feel pleasure from it. All these parasites mean I need to eat a lot more than the average person, and I still look thin. And to be quite honest, it means I can enjoy so much more food than most people. I also keep multiple cultures of bed bugs and leeches in containers and allow them to feed on my blood sometimes. Although those kinds are not really my passion, as they do not live primarily on the human body, but I think they're interesting nonetheless, and I find them pretty cute. Now it's time for my confession. My obsession and fetish isn't just about infecting myself anymore. I also have the desire to infect others, and I have acted on those desires. Sometimes my parasites just pioneer to new lands on their own. My family have caught pinworms multiple times without my intention, and other times I purposely spread them. I have infected strangers, friends, and even my own family. I know it's bad, but I just can't stop. I think I have parasites in my brain that make me feel like I need to spread them. I know how crazy that sounds, but if you knew the feeling, you would understand. Maybe it's just a mental illness, or maybe its origin is parasitic in nature. I really don't know. All I know is it feels good when I do these things. I feel an intense need to spread my children, and when I do, I feel pleasure. I must have spent thousands on my children over the years. I sometimes sprinkle tapeworm eggs into people's drinks when I'm out at clubs. I also caught hair down their lice from relations with a random woman I met at the same club, and in return, I'm pretty sure I gave her pinworms, so it was a trade. The woman wasn't even attractive. I just wanted to gift her some pinworms. And instead, I basically won the jackpot by sleeping with her. I then spread my hair down their lice to at least 4 other women. Sometimes I also sprinkle worm eggs onto food in buffets whenever I visit them. Holy shit. Like, hold up, before I finish this story, that's insane. That has made me never want to eat at a buffet ever again or go to a club ever again. That is horrific. This psychopath legitimately is spreading worm eggs onto food in buffets. That is the most disturbing thing I have ever read. Oh my God. And I guess we will finish what we have started reading. And the post finishes up by saying, "Yes, I understand you would think it's gross and messed up. I am basically betraying my species for my children. It's hard. I do enjoy people and I have wonderful friends and family, but I also love my parasites and my preference is just too hard to control. I don't want to hurt anyone when I do these things, but a force beyond my understanding is driving me to do it. I think I could possibly have a parasite in my brain that has not yet been discovered. I'm sorry to all the people I've caused discomfort to, but it's for a cause beyond human understanding. Although this can all be justified, I still feel guilt. I don't want to hurt anyone. I hope the people I spread my gifts to can find it in their hearts to be a little more open-minded and not kill my children, but learn to live with them like I have instead. I'm aware how strange and disgusting others will find me if they knew. I'm aware of how immoral this seems to most people. I'm assuming you may see me in a negative light after reading this, but remember, I only want what's best for my children. And if you were truly in my shoes, I'm sure you would do the same." And oh my God, there is a lot to unpack there. Him wanting to spread his children, him calling them children is just insane. That is so creepy. And him just wanting to spread it. He also said he believes this is all justified, but he still feels guilt. Oh my gosh. That's just one of the craziest and most disgusting stories I've ever read. And I never, ever want to go to a buffet again, or ever go to a club, or I don't know, hang out with the randos. But hopefully you watching, everyone watching, never runs into someone like that and you catch one of his children, as he calls it. On to the next one. Creepy pizza delivery guy. Originally posted to Creepy Encounters. So, me and my boyfriend like going out dancing on the weekend, which always ends up with us stumbling into our favorite pizza place before joining the taxi queue. We've done this most weekends for over a year now, so have become somewhat friendly with the guys who owns the pizzeria. They know us by name and always make a big fuss over us and offer us discount every time. Now here's where it gets freaky. Last night, a Sunday night, at 11 p.m., my boyfriend and I were in bed because we both had work this morning. My phone started ringing, which was weird for that time of night, and I saw it was an unknown number, so I ignored it. Next thing we know, there's someone knocking on the front door. All the lights in the house were off, so we were clearly in bed or not in. I had another call from the same number, and then the person knocking started hammering on the door and flickering the letterbox. My boyfriend got up to answer it, even though I was a bit shaken up and warned him not to. If I had been alone in the house, I never would have answered. So he goes downstairs to answer the door, and lo and behold, it's one of the guys from the pizzeria holding 2 freshly cooked pizzas that we didn't order. He said not to tell the other guys at the shop, but they were a gift from him to us, his favorite customers. My boyfriend took them from him and thanked him, but we couldn't get back to sleep for hours. We just felt so odd about it. We have ordered from there once for a takeaway, so that's clearly how he got our address and my phone number, but it's still weird, right? And then some of the comments under the post read as follows. Weird. I wonder if he thought you'd be home alone, which is a scary thought. I had a weird pizza delivery encounter a couple years ago. I answered the door and he fidgeted longer than needed to hand me the pizza. He didn't say anything, but I don't know. He gave me a weird feeling. And I even said it to my roommate when I came back in. Minutes later, he requested me on Facebook, which creeped me the fuck out. I decided to Google his name and look at his dockets. I'm a nosy bitch anyway, but had to find out his deal. And the first search result is a news article about him impersonating a police officer and kidnapping someone. He had charges before that for harassment too, so now I'm a little paranoid. I think like a week later, I'm pumping gas and I look over and he's at the red light, just staring me down. Nothing further happened. I don't think he worked there that long, but I definitely should have said something to the pizza place because someone with that record should not be a delivery driver. I'm not saying he shouldn't work. He can cook the pizza, but like he shouldn't have access to people's info and going to their homes. I would maybe let the manager know, or maybe your boyfriend could talk to them. Either way, I'd keep alert because he came after hours. Who knows if he'll do it again. And then the OP replied to that comment by saying, "Wow, that's so creepy. I know what you mean about the weird feeling. You should always trust your gut. I'm glad nothing else untoward happened to you. They definitely shouldn't have someone like that be able to access customer information. I wonder how often these things get overlooked. It's a scary thought. My boyfriend is going to have a word with the manager next time we're in town. If it had been earlier in the day and he said it was a canceled order or something, it probably wouldn't have been so weird. But to be out so late and literally knock us awake just to give us 2 pizzas that we didn't order is so freaky." Another comment read, "That's very strange. It seems to be a very odd time to be delivering pizzas to your house. Maybe he thought you didn't live with your boyfriend. My guess is that he got off work and wanted to bring you the pizzas and was hoping that you would invite him in. He said not to tell the other guys at the shop. Seems suspicious as well. He knows that what he's doing isn't professional, so he's keeping his coworkers from finding out. I think you should call the manager and tell him what happened. That delivery guy shouldn't have access to your personal contact information and come into your house late at night. I'm glad your boyfriend answered the door and you were safe upstairs." The OP then replies to that comment by saying, "That's such a scary thought. He has delivered to our house before when I was alone, so it makes sense he was checking to see if I lived alone. That's pretty freaky." And then another comment read, "Hopefully you didn't eat those pizzas either. You never know what he may have put on them. There was a news story in 2015 about a man who was repeatedly busting into females' coworkers' coffee because he was attracted to her. Beating on your door in the middle of the night and calling persistently shows the pizza guy is a wacko. I hope you toss those pizzas in the trash bin." The OP then replied saying, "And yep, the pizzas went in the bin the next morning." And then an update post, posted 2 years later. The OP said, "I wrote a post a while back about a creepy delivery guy who turned up at my house late at night with pizzas for me that I didn't order. You can read it here. So I thought I'd provide an update for everyone who wanted one. After the night, the guy, I'll call him Bill for now, turned up at our house. Me and my partner went out for drinks a couple weeks later and ended up in the pizza shop. We noticed immediately that Bill was not there, and I assumed that he was out on a delivery instead. Before we left though, the manager came out at the back and said hello, and then apologized profusely about Bill's behavior, and told us that he was fired. He was very thankful that we weren't boycotting the place, and I assured him that we wouldn't because it really was the best pizza around. I'm not sure how the manager found out about Bill bringing the pizzas to our house, but I informed the manager about everything else that happened that night. How late it was, Bill calling my phone, etc. And manager was furious, to say the least. He assured us that he wouldn't be letting him work there again, and my partner and I went on our way and went home. A few months later, we moved houses, unrelated to Bill, and never heard from him again. Until he showed up one night at our new house. He was delivering food for Uber Eats. I didn't want to take it further because we hadn't heard or seen him in months, so we just left it alone and went about our life. But then, about a month ago, I was going through my message requests on Facebook, and I saw that someone called Bill had been messaging me, or trying to, for months. I went into the messages and clicked his profile, and lo and behold, it was creepy Bill. I blocked him immediately, and that was when I decided I'd report him on Uber Eats. So I filed a complaint about him, and I haven't heard anything since. But yeah, I've got no idea how he found me on Facebook or how he knew my surname, but he did, and tried to message me for months. So there's the update. Creepy stuff. And all right, guys, that wraps up some disturbing Reddit threads. And to be honest, this was one of my most favorite videos I've made in a long time. Would you like to see this turned into a series? And if so, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the Patreon. You get this early and uncensored and extra content, hours and hours of extra content. So thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. And hopefully you enjoyed the longer videos as well. This one was like an hour 20. Would you like to see longer videos than this, or shorter, or somewhere in between? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single comment. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, comment down below and let me know if you'd like to see this turned into a series, because I would love for this to be turned into a series. Thank you so much for watching. This was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye.